Hey guys, tonight we slip on some ragged boots, duck under a splintered doorway, and shuffle into a world where spittoons outnumber bathtubs and clean water is a matter of opinion. You're waking up in the Wild West, or at least, what counts as morning when your mattress is hay. Your alarm clock is a braying mule, and your chances of surviving past noon hover somewhere between slim and already dead. This is not the West of Hollywood showdowns or romantic cowboy silhouettes. This is the real, rough-edged, muddy, itchy, brutally boring version where even brushing your teeth is an ordeal. You probably won't survive this day. But hey, at least it'll be historic. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, feel free to drop your location and the time where you are right now. I love seeing who's tuning in from where. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up to the sound of someone hacking up a lung in the corner. Not metaphorically like Full and Phlegm Symphony. The bunkhouse you've been allotted is, charitably, a large wooden box with hay-stuffed cots nailed into the walls. There are 8 other humans in here. One is missing a sock. Another is missing several teeth. No one is missing a sense of misery. The smell hits next. A potent blend of damp wood, unwashed bodies, chewing tobacco, and horse sweat wafts in like it pays rent. You inhale through your mouth, which doesn't help, because now you taste it. You shift under the threadbare blanket and immediately regret it. The straw mattress has compressed into something resembling lumpy stone. Your back protests, your shoulders groan, your left leg is asleep, and your right leg is thinking about joining it. Outside, the early morning wind rattles through the cracks in the plank walls like it's trying to pick a fight. You sit up, and your hatchet, one dusty, misshapen, personality-free cowboy hat falls off your head and lands in someone's discarded coffee cup. Good now. It smells like scorched beans and despair. You retrieve it anyway. It's still the most protective thing you own. Slipping your boots on is a chore. They're stiff from yesterday's sweat and filled with what you sincerely hope is just sand. You shake them out, something small and beetle-shaped scuttles away. You don't scream, but only because you don't want to wake the guy who threatens people in his sleep. Next up, your shirt. A fine beige linen number that was white once, maybe 3 years ago. It's got one sleeve shorter than the other, 2 patches in the armpits, and buttons that seem to be playing a game of hide-and-seek. You layer it under a vest that smells vaguely of wet dog. Slap on your hat and brace for fresh air. The second you open the bunkhouse door, you regret that too, because fresh is relative. The stables are close, too close, and horses are not known for their pleasant morning breath. The combination of manure, hay, and someone else's morning flatulence slaps you in the face with the gentle subtlety of a thrown frying pan. A tumbleweed rolls by. Of course it does. You wander toward the wash trough, which is basically a shared wooden coffin full of yesterday's dust and this morning's ice. One of the ranch hands has already claimed it, scrubbing his face like he's trying to erase it. You wait your turn and finally splash yourself with water that feels like it was personally blessed by a glacier. Your brain freezes. Your eyes water. You're awake now, whether you wanted to be or not. Breakfast. Well, that's a loose term. Someone left a pot of beans warming over the outdoor fire pit. They're slightly burned, mostly mushy, and flavored with something you suspect is ash. You eat them anyway, because it's that or yesterday's jerky. And you already bent a molar trying to chew that last night. Historians agree. The Wild West diet was less high-protein cowboy fuel and more a series of culinary punishments. Beans, salted pork, dry biscuits, and coffee so thick you could use it to patch a roof. That was the norm. And no, there was no oat milk. There was barely milk. There were barely oats. Someone stumbles past you with a chamber pot. You politely pretend not to notice. The latrine is still frozen. Literally frozen. And that's something you'll deal with later when you absolutely can't avoid it. You look around at the camp. A few chickens scratch lazily at the dirt. A dog with one eye naps in the sun, probably dreaming of a better life. A cow moos without commitment. The wind stirs the dust, and your lips already feel like they're made of dried leather. You've made it approximately 27 minutes into your first full day in the Wild West. You're already considering giving up. Still, you slap your hat firmly on your head, take a deep breath, and try to channel your inner cowboy. That brave, stoic, denim-clad figure who doesn't flinch at danger, who rides into the sunset like he invented horseback, who speaks only when necessary and spits with accuracy. Then you trip over a rusty bucket, stub your toe, and curse louder than the preacher at last week's wedding. So much for stoic. You shuffle back to the bunkhouse, with one boot slightly unlaced, and the other already collecting dust, because that's the thing about Wild West mornings. They don't gently greet you. They ambush you. Your stomach gurgles in protest at the meager bean breakfast, and your mouth feels like it's been lined with burlap. Time to make coffee, or something pretending to be coffee. You find a blackened tin cup, dented, lopsided, and still slightly warm from whoever used it last. You don't ask who. That way lies madness. Near the smoldering campfire, a soot-covered kettle burbles over low heat. It contains a murky liquid that technically qualifies as coffee by mid-1800s standards: water boiled with crushed beans, a handful of charcoal, and at least one floating insect that's given up on life. You pour the dark brew into your cup, watching a gritty film swirl across the surface like the top layer of a swamp. You take a sip. It tastes like smoke, metal, and personal betrayal. The fringe historians argue whether cowboys intentionally made their coffee bad as a way to wake up, or whether it just naturally happened when you reused the same grounds 7 times. Either way, it's effective. You're awake. Slightly angry, but awake. You look around for something to go with it. There's a lone biscuit sitting on a cracked wooden plate. You're not sure how old it is. It could be yesterday's, or from the gold rush. You knock it against the bench. It doesn't crumble. It doesn't bend. You decide it's better used as a weapon than food, and quietly slide it back. One of the other ranch hands strolls up, eating a slice of salted pork with his fingers. No plate, no ceremony, just pure, uncut salt. You want? He asks, holding out a piece. You politely decline. He shrugs and drops the rest of it into his pocket. For later, that image will haunt you. Now begins the real challenge. Boiling water, not just for coffee, but for anything. Cleaning, cooking, attempting some vague sense of hygiene. You find the nearest bucket and haul it toward the fire. It's heavy. The handle creaks ominously. Water sloshes over the side and onto your foot, which is great, because wet leather boots are the ultimate mood enhancer. You set the bucket on a small grate and watch as the fire beneath it gives off more smoke than heat. You fan the flames with your hat, accidentally hit yourself in the face, and start to question whether today will ever stop being slapstick. Eventually, the water begins to bubble. Victory. You remove it from the fire and promptly realize you have no towel, no oven mitt, and very little upper arm strength. The handle scorches your fingers. You yelp and drop the bucket. It lands upright miraculously, but splashes half its contents across your trousers. Warm water, cold air. You now feel like a soggy sock. You wander back toward the wash trough for a moment of personal reflection, and by reflection, I mean trying to splash your face again without losing all sensation in your fingers. You think about how people lived like this every single day, with no soap, no toothpaste, no gentle lavender hand sanitizer, just grit, smoke, and prayers. Historians still argue whether most Wild West settlers were genuinely as rugged as we picture them, or whether they just had no other option. You're starting to believe it's the latter. When survival is the baseline, luxury becomes a myth, like clean shirts or eggs without feathers stuck to them. Someone nearby is trying to cook eggs. You wander over to watch. He cracks one into a small skillet over a campfire and mutters, "Please no blood, please no blood." The egg hisses, leaks something suspicious, and he scrapes it into the dirt. One down. He grunts. Breakfast roulette continues. Meanwhile, another man is sewing a button onto his shirt with what appears to be a fishbone. No thread, just stubbornness and hope. You admire the dedication. Then again, buttons are rare out here. You've seen more people use twine or scraps of leather to keep their clothes from flapping in the wind. Like a tragic flag, a boy walks past, gnawing on a heel of bread so stale he's had to wet it with coffee. You try to look away, but the crunch echoes like someone snapping twigs. His teeth must be made of iron. You return to the fire and poke at a pot of leftover beans from earlier. They've hardened into a shape that could legally be considered sculpture. You take another sip of your coffee, which has cooled into something resembling ink and carries the consistency of syrup. You tell yourself it's fine. You've had worse. You probably haven't. In a far-off part of the camp, someone starts shouting about a missing sock. You tune it out. It's not your problem. unless it becomes your sock. That's how things work around here. You finally notice the sun creeping over the ridge fence, pale and entirely unbothered by your suffering. Its light casts long shadows across the dusty ground. The cold hasn't left yet. Your fingers are still stiff, and your boots squelch softly when you shift so far. You've successfully made coffee, spilled water, burned your hand, eaten half a spoonful of beans, and learned that pocket meat is a thing. It's not much, but out here, it counts as surviving. You decide to try boiling more water, maybe for washing, maybe for a future cup of coffee that won't attack your taste buds. You pour what's left into the tin cup, swirl it, and dump it onto the ground. The dirt hisses. A tiny beetle scuttles out of the way. You and that beetle. Same energy. You sit on a crate, hands wrapped around your now empty cup, and try not to cry. Not because you're sad, just because the smoke from the fire is directly in your eyes. Again, the problem with getting dressed in the Wild West isn't so much fashion as it is logistics. Your clothes are stiff, your fingers are cold, and your options are limited. You stand beside your straw bed, eyeing a shirt that might once have been white but now exists in a state of permanent beige. It smells faintly of bacon grease and horse sweat, which, in context, is kind of the gold. You yank it on over your head and instantly regret it. The fabric crackles like dried parchment. You're not sure whether that's from the cold, the grime, or whatever crawled across it during the night. You try not to think about it. Next. Trousers. Thick, brown, canvas-like material designed for durability, not comfort. You pull them up one leg at a time and discover that the left knee hole has grown significantly since yesterday. You consider patching it, then remember you still don't know how to sew. Fringe records suggest some cowhands simply wrapped strips of old shirts around their legs to keep warm, which honestly doesn't sound that bad right now. Your belt is a length of frayed rope, tied in a half-hearted knot that holds everything together through sheer willpower. You tug it tight, say a silent prayer, and move on. The boots. Oh, the boots. Still damp from yesterday's surprise creak incident. They now sit stiffly by the door like two angry loaves of bread. You hold your breath and jam your foot in. Something squishes. You hope it's just water. You tell yourself it's just water. Historians still debate whether cowboys routinely stuffed their boots with straw or cloth for insulation, or if they simply endured the misery. You decide you'll vote straw next time someone asks. Your coat, if you can call it that, is a patched-up wool monstrosity with one pocket and no buttons. You pull it on like a knight donning battered armor. It smells like it's been alive at least once. Possibly still is. You slap the sleeves a few times to shake off the dust, and an actual moth escapes. You salute it. Out of the corner of your eye, you see a young ranch hand struggling with his suspenders. They've twisted into a knot so complex it might require a priest, not a solution. You offer no help. The code of the West is clear. You handle your own suspenders. With the basics on, it's time to accessorize. You find your neckerchief, once vibrant, now faded to the color of old gravy, and tie it loosely around your neck. It's not for fashion. It's to keep the dust out of your lungs when the wind picks up, which it always does. You glance around. For your hat, it's not on the peg, it's not on the bedroll, it's not under the table. Eventually, you find it outside, upside down, filled with dirt and the footprints of a small animal. You dump it out, slap it against your thigh, and place it squarely on your head. It's slightly too big and dips over your eyes. Perfect. Now for the weapons. Everyone carries something because out here, the difference between prepared and buried is often measured in seconds. You've got a 6-shooter, notched from years of use, and a small folding knife that has seen more beans than blood. You slide the revolver into your belt and tuck the knife into your boot. Ready, you step outside. Fully dressed, only to realize you've forgotten your gloves. You go back in. The gloves are hard as boards, curled up like dried leaves. You spend 2 minutes forcing your hands in, wiggling each finger into place like a sculptor working clay. There's a hole in the thumb. You ignore it. Finally, you stand in the morning air, dressed like a true frontiersperson. 70% wool, 20% dirt, 10% regrets. You look around. Everyone else looks just as miserable. One man is wearing a coat made from 2 stitched-together blankets. Another has newspaper stuffed into his boots. The ingenuity is impressive. The fashion, less so. Clothes on the frontier weren't about looking good. They were about surviving. Long johns rarely got washed. Socks were a luxury, and if you had more than one shirt, people suspected you of being either wealthy or suspiciously clean. Both were considered red flags. You saddle up your horse more accurately. You try to be saddle is cold, stiff, and slightly damp, just like everything else. You heave it onto the horse's back, adjust the girth, and tighten the strap. Your gloves make the buckle slippery. You mutter words that are technically family-friendly, but emotionally intense. The horse gives you a look that says, "You again." You pat its neck and whisper, "We're both doing our best." Once mounted, you shift in your seat, trying to find a spot that doesn't feel like it's digging directly into your tailbone. No luck. You're going to be sore by nightfall. And then comes the final accessory, grit. Not metaphorical, grit, actual dirt. Dust from the ground, smoke from the fire, grime from your clothes. It clings to your skin, nestles in your eyelashes, and settles into every crease. You are now officially dressed. You ride out toward the day's tasks, fully aware that by sundown, you'll be bruised, filthy, and very much in need of a second pair of socks that you still don't have. But you're ready-ish. Somewhere behind you, someone shouts, "Hey, you forgot your other glove." You hold up your hands. You're wearing both. They squint. Never mind, must have been yesterday's. The first thing you notice about riding out in the Wild West isn't the freedom, it's the immediate, unrelenting discomfort. Your horse jolts forward like it's had coffee and a grudge. Every step is a minor earthquake for your lower spine, and the saddle feels like it was designed by someone who hated humans and possibly liked watching them suffer. You squint at the horizon. It's not much of a view, just dry brush, cracked dirt, and the occasional patch of tumbleweed blowing around like it has somewhere better to be. The sun has already climbed high, and its light bakes the earth in sheets of shimmering heat. It's not even noon, and your back is sticky. Your neckerchief is doing a poor job as a sweat sponge. Let's talk about that sun. No sunglasses, no sunscreen, just raw ultraviolet rage slamming into your face. Your hat, bless its dusty sole, provides a sliver of shade, but the brim is cracked, and one side droops like it's given up. Historians still argue whether frontier folks actually suffered chronic sun damage, or if the layer of grime acted as a crude SPF. Either way, you're already considering trading your dignity for a parasol. Your mouth is dry, your canteen is warm, and your lips are beginning to peel like old wallpaper. You take a sip of water and immediately regret it. It tastes like rust and sadness, probably because the tin canteen doubles as your soup ladle. Hydration is important, but flavor is optional out here. You ride for what feels like hours. In reality, it's maybe 30 minutes, tops. Your thighs are sore, your knees ache, and your left foot keeps slipping from the stirrup. You adjust your seat. Bad idea. Now your tailbone has entered the chat with some complaints of its own. Ahead, the landscape begins to shift, sparser vegetation, more rocks, and little pockets of sand that your horse thoughtfully steps into, just to see if you're paying attention. You are now, very much so. Your spine is vibrating. To your left, you see a few scrubby mesquite trees. To your right, a buzzard circles. You'd like to believe it's not following you personally, but you're not optimistic. The Wild West wasn't known for subtle omens. A sudden gust of wind kicks up dirt into your eyes, nose, and teeth. The sky remains clear, but the ground itself seems determined to blind you. You cough, and the taste of dry grit lodges somewhere between your tonsils and last night's beans. Your horse snorts in sympathy, or maybe mockery. Hard to tell. As you crest a small ridge, you spot a cluster of rocks below, maybe a half-mile out. Shelter, maybe, or a snake convention. Either way, it's something to look at. This is the rhythm of the West. Endless trail, unchanging scenery, a whole lot of squinting, and the quiet certainty that everything out here wants you mildly dead, even the plants, especially the plants. One of them, a low, spiky shrub, hooks your pant leg as you ride past. It rips a nice new tear and leaves behind a trail of thorns. You say thank you, sarcastically. Your stomach grumbles. Not hunger, exactly, more a general protest that nothing good has happened to it in a while. You consider eating a chunk of jerky, but your hands are too dirty and your teeth too tired. Besides, last time you bit into it, you chipped a molar. Eventually, you find a place to stop. A flat patch of land, mostly rock, partially shade. You dismount with the grace of a half-baked biscuit and nearly collapse. Your legs are rubber, your back is steel. Your boots are full of pebbles. Congratulations. You survived the first real ride of the day. You stretch your arms overhead and immediately regret it as your shoulder pops audibly. A nearby squirrel freezes, as if offended. You nod an apology. You squat by a rock and splash a few drops of water on your face. They evaporate before you're upright again. This place doesn't believe in moisture. According to some lesser-known traveler diaries, cowboys used to soak a bandana in urine to cool off during long rides. You file that away as a last resort, tip you hope never to revisit. A lizard scampers past your boot. It pauses. You pause. There's a moment of mutual understanding. You're both just trying to make it to sundown. You remount. It's even worse the second time. You fumble the stirrups, the horse shifts, and your thigh cramps mid-swing. But you do it. You're back in the saddle, dusty, aching, and slightly more sunburned than before. As you ride on, the trail winds through a dry gulch. The air is still, heavy with the smell of dry sage and horse sweat. Somewhere in the distance, you hear a coyote yipping. It's not close, but it's not that far, either. You take another sip from your canteen and nearly gag. The water has warmed to the temperature of regret and metal. You put it away. Your mouth remains dry. Eventually, you spot a distant rise that might lead back toward town or another set of hills, equally hot and unhelpful. You sigh. It's hard to tell where you're going when every direction looks like the inside of a baking dish. Still, you press on, because you're in the Wild West, and there's no Uber, no air conditioning, no escape button, just a man, a horse, and a saddle-shaped torture device, heading into the dust with the blind optimism of someone who still thinks this counts as freedom. You wipe your brow. Your hand comes away muddy. You laugh a little, then cough, then stop laughing, because it's hot and dry, and somewhere behind you, that vulture is still circling. By the time you reach the edge of town, your body has already started composing its resignation letter. Every joint is stiff. Your lips are now officially more cracked than skin, and you suspect that one of your kneecaps is sulking. But here you are, rolling into what passes for civilization in the Wild West. And by civilization, we mean about 12 buildings, 3 horses tied to a rail, 1 drunk slumped against a post, and a dog that may or may not be a coyote in disguise. The main street is little more than a dirt track, flanked by wooden storefronts with names like Grubbs, General, and Dr. P. Ham, Teeth and Tonic. The signs creak in the wind, the windows are smeared with dust, and you're pretty sure that saloon over there just gave you a threatening wink. The whole town looks like it's one bad sneeze away from collapsing. You dismount awkwardly. Legs don't want to cooperate. Tie your horse to a post that seems slightly less wobbly than the others. A teenage stable boy eyes you with mild contempt and takes the reins. He's barefoot. He spits, then walks the horse away with a swagger that says, "I know more about livestock than you ever will." You shuffle into the saloon, because that's what you do in the West. It's not for the drinks, or the gambling, or the piano playing softly in the corner, though actually, the piano has one working key and is currently being played by a man, with no visible rhythm. No, you're here because saloons are the only places with shade, drinkable liquids, and chairs not made of rocks. Inside, the air smells like sour beer, stale cigars, and possibly horse. There's a haze of smoke hanging just below the ceiling, and the floor is sticky in a way that defies natural science. You step carefully. You order a drink. The barkeep is a woman with arms like tree trunks and a gaze that could wither crops. She hands you a glass with a nod. You nod back. No words are exchanged. It's better that way. You sip. It burns. It's not good, but it's strong, and that's all that matters. A few tables are occupied, one by a trio of gamblers, another by a man snoring into his plate, and another by someone whittling what might be a spoon or might be a tiny coffin. Historians still argue whether saloons served primarily as rest stops, social hubs, or makeshift therapy sessions for men who'd seen too many tumbleweeds. Probably all three. What's certain is that this one, like most, has a piano, a staircase leading to some questionable upstairs rooms, and a small back door that everyone pretends not to notice. You take a seat and ease your boots off. Immediate mistake. The scent wafting upward could probably stun a prairie dog at 20 paces. You shove them back on before you contribute to any unintended bar evacuations. You watch the card players. They're using a deck that's missing a few corners and stained in ways you don't want to think about. One of them glances at you. He's got a squint, a beard, and an aura that says, "I once buried a man for sneezing near my beans." You look away. Just then, the door bursts open with a bang. Everyone flinches. A man stumbles in half-covered, in dust, bleeding from the elbow, and muttering something about cattle gone sideways. No one moves. After a moment, he sits at the bar, orders whiskey, and starts humming. Apparently, this is normal. You think about ordering food, then you remember what passed for stew last time. Beans, questionable meat, and something you're pretty sure was a pint. You pass. Instead, you head out the back door and take a moment behind the saloon, near the water trough. You splash your face with water that's probably seen better centuries. It's gritty, but cold. A blessing in disguise. Nearby, a cat lounges, under a wagon, watching you with narrowed eyes. You nod respectfully. In this town, even the animals have seniority. You walk along the dusty boardwalk, checking out the other establishments. There's the general store stacked with flour sacks, bootlaces, and a suspiciously large barrel labeled cure-all. There's the barber, who doubles as a dentist, surgeon, and occasional undertaker. His chair is outside. You walk faster. Jailhouse is barely larger than an outhouse, with a deputy napping out front, hat over his face, and one hand still on his pistol. You decide not to test whether it's loaded. You pass the blacksmith, his hammer ringing against iron in a rhythm that feels almost musical. The heat is intense, the sparks fly, and the smell of singed hair, probably yours, lingers for a while. You nod to him. He grunts. A blacksmith's greeting. As you stroll past the church, you hear a quiet hymn drifting through the cracked door. It's barely more than a whisper, but it feels like the only clean sound in the entire town. You pause, just for a second, then the bell tower creaks ominously, and you take that as your cue to keep moving. By late afternoon, you've circled the whole place, twice. It's not a big town. It's not a particularly lively town, but it's a town. And out here, that means something. You return to the saloon, grab your gear, and start thinking about where you'll spend the night. There's a boarding house with beds, if you're lucky. If not, there's the hayloft above the livery stable, where at least it smells like horses instead of unwashed boots. But one thing's certain. You're not spending another hour in that saddle today. Your spine would unionize. You settle onto the saloon porch, watching the sky shift from scorched blue to dusty gold. The air finally starts to cool. Barely a dog barks somewhere. A child laughs. Someone strums a banjo string, horribly off-key. The town breathes, slow and gritty, and you, for now, are still alive. You wake with a start, having dozed off against the porch post, your neck bent at an angle last seen in Birds of Prey. It's twilight now, or what counts for it, in the west. A bruise-colored sky overhead, stars pricking through like someone stabbed holes in a piece of hide. You blink, groan, and check to make sure all your possessions are still with you. Knife, check. Boots, regretfully. Yes, your last half swig of water, evaporated, just like your will to walk. Sleep tonight is non-negotiable. The question is, where? You eye the boarding house again. It has a porch swing and lace curtains, which is deceptive. The inside smells like boiled cabbage and decades of cowboy feet. Still, it has walls, and possibly a mattress that hasn't been gnawed by rodents this week. You shuffle up the steps. A bell tinkles as you push open the door, and a woman greets you from behind a desk with a smile that says, "I will judge your boots, your manners, and your coin purse in that order." You give her your name, not that it matters, and she gives you a key. Room 3. Upstairs. End of the hall. The hallway creaks ominously. The wallpaper, faded roses on beige, peels like sunburned skin. You unlock the door and step into a room just big enough to contain a cot, a wash basin, and your growing disappointment. The bed tilts slightly to the left, like it's considering escape. You remove your boots again. Still terrible. The floor is cold but not alive. You count that as progress. Then comes the ritual. Splashing your face with water that smells faintly of rust and iron. Wrapping a thin wool blanket around your shoulders, and trying to sleep without thinking about who laughs. Use this pillow and whether they survived it. Sleep, however, is elusive, partly because of the springs poking your ribs, but mostly because of the sounds. The Wild West doesn't have nighttime so much as it has another, darker kind of chaos. A dog howls in the distance. Horses shuffle in their stalls. Someone across The hall is either snoring or choking, hard to tell. And from the street below, laughter erupts, raucous mean laughter, followed by a thud, and then ... nothing. Historians still argue whether frontier towns were safer at night, or just better at hiding trouble in the dark. You're leaning toward the latter. You get up and peer through the warped glass pane. The street is empty now, just drifting dust and a swinging saloon door. You close the curtain. That's when you hear the music. Not the out-of-tune piano you endured earlier, but something softer, played on a harmonica. It drifts in from somewhere behind the boarding house. Slow, mournful notes, the kind that sound like regret soaked in whiskey. You press your ear to the wall. It's oddly comforting. A reminder that you're not the only person lying awake, thinking about how this whole adventure thing might have been a terrible idea. You lie back down. Try again. Count imaginary cattle. By the third cow, you are startled by a loud bang. Not a gunshot, at least. You hope not, but something falling. Maybe a barrel. Maybe a person. You wait. Silence. Then, footsteps on the stairs. Someone's walking. Up slowly, deliberately. A boot step. A pause. A creak. You hold your breath. They stop outside your door. Now, let's be honest. You've seen enough movies to know how this ends. Only this isn't a movie, and you have nothing to defend yourself with, except a chipped wash basin and your wit, which is not particularly sharp at this hour. But after a moment, the footsteps move on. The door at the end of the hall opens, closes. You exhale. You consider wedging a chair under the knob, but then remember the chair has 3 legs, and barely supports its own existence. So you roll over, pulling the scratchy blanket up to your chin, and try not to think about frontier murders or vengeful ghosts with unfinished business. And wouldn't you know it, your body finally gives in. Sleep creeps up like a cautious coyote, and you sink into it. Not deeply, more like napping with one eye open, but it's enough. You dream, sort of. It's a mashup of saloon noises, swirling dust, and a tiny man riding a chicken while yelling gold in them hills. You decide not to interpret it. You wake again before dawn, because of course you do. The light filtering through the curtain is faint, bluish. Somewhere outside, a rooster crows hoarsely, like it's as tired of life as you are. You sit up, stretch, and hear every vertebra pop like kettle corn. You gather your things, roll, water pouch, dignity, and trudge downstairs. The landlady is sipping something dark and bitter. She nods at you. Breakfast's cold. She mutters. You nod back. No words needed. You grab a plate. Beans. Bread, so dry it may double as a weapon. A strip of meat that crunches like it shouldn't. You eat it anyway, because in the Wild West, breakfast isn't for pleasure, it's for survival. You're not eating because you're hungry. You're eating because you don't want to faint during your next 8-mile trek. And speaking of trekking, you've got places to be. You're not sure where, but staying still too long in the West is basically asking for trouble. The kind that comes with spurs and bad intentions. You step outside. The air is sharp and clean, in that everything you smell is dust and horse kind of way. You squint toward the horizon. More sky, more land, more walking. But you've made it through one night. No small feat. So you saddle up mentally, at least, and set off down the dirt road. Your boots already regretting it, your shoulders stiff, and your soul just a little more seasoned after all. The day's just beginning, and who knows what kind of wild it has in store. The sun's finally made its appearance, though appearance might be a generous word. It doesn't rise so much as it looms hazy, pale, filtered through dust and thin clouds like a lantern behind old parchment. Still, it's warm on your shoulders, and after a night like that, warmth is a luxury. You're walking again, or limping, maybe both. The road ahead is rutted and dry, a series of dips and ridges that seem carefully designed to twist ankles and break cartwheels. You pass a weather-beaten sign pointing vaguely east. The letters are mostly faded, but you catch the words silver and dead, and decide to keep going straight. Your next stop is a frontier town rumored to have a blacksmith, a post office, and miraculously a bathhouse. Whether the bathhouse has actual hot water or just a tub and strong judgment is up for debate. Your canteen is half full, your boots are half dead, your hope, quarter strength at best. As you trudge, you start to appreciate the subtle menace of the wilderness. It doesn't shout danger, it whispers it. Crickets chirp in rhythmic pulses, then suddenly stop. A hawk circles overhead, its shadow slicing across the dirt like a blade. Somewhere nearby, a rattlesnake shakes its tail, and you briefly question every decision that led to this moment. Historians still argue whether daily travel on foot was the exception or the norm for Western settlers. What's not debated, that distances felt longer when you had to worry about snakebite, sunstroke, and accidentally wandering onto someone else's claimed land, which, out here, meant you might get shot for standing too close to a pile of rocks. The horizon stretches ahead like an endless dare. Behind you, the town shrinks away, swallowed by dust and memory. Ahead, more scrub brush, more skeletal trees, and the occasional buzzard keeping tabs on your progress. Eventually, mercifully, you spot it. Another settlement. Small, low buildings crouched together like they're hiding from the wind. A windmill spins lazily. A few kids chase each other around a well. A dog barks once, then changes its mind. You limp into town like a poorly written legend. First order of business, water. There's a pump next to the general store. You stagger over and begin cranking, your muscles groaning in protest. A thin stream of water spurts out, cold and metallic. You splash your face, take a careful sip, and feel your spine unkink by 2 degrees. Hydration is magic. Second order of business. Information: the general store is dim and smells like rope and flour. Behind the counter stands a man with a handlebar mustache, so perfectly waxed it could skewer flies. He sizes you up. You nod. He nods. A sacred frontier exchange. You ask about the BATHHOUSE. He chuckles. Out back. If the boiler ain't acting up, you shuffle that way, passing a chicken with a limp and a goat that looks like it knows things. The bathhouse is a low shed with a tin roof and a crooked chimney. Inside, a tub sits beneath a rust-streaked pipe, and a woman with forearms like axe handles is stoking a fire under a copper boiler. She eyes you. Dollar gets you 10 minutes. More if you don't talk. You hand over the coin and strip down, faster than a man at gunpoint. The tub creaks ominously as you ease in. The water is hot, miraculously, gloriously hot. You melt, you dissolve, you become one with the steam. You haven't felt this clean since. Actually, you've never felt this clean. You close your eyes and sigh, the sound echoing slightly in a small wooden space. The woman outside hums a tune, something slow and wordless, like a lullaby with calluses. A knock comes after what feels like a blink. Time's up. You groan, climb out, and dry off with a towel so rough it might be made of bark. Your clothes, now slightly less offensive from steam exposure, go back on, damp but familiar, like a relationship you can't quite quit. Outside, the sun has risen higher. The air smells of dust, bread, and horse. A trio of men plays cards on an overturned crate. One wears suspenders over a shirt so patched it might qualify as abstract art. Another chews tobacco like it owes him money. You spot a small flyer nailed to a post. Wanted, dead or alive. The sketch is crude, the reward handsome, and the accusation vague. You consider whether that could be you in a week. Hopefully not. A woman in a blue bonnet passes, carrying a basket of eggs with the reverence of someone who knows how is. Breakfast becomes disaster. A child trails behind her, clutching a wooden doll with one eye. You find a bench and sit. The bath heat lingers in your bones. You unwrap a biscuit from your pack dry, slightly salty, with a hint of gunpowder from the general store's shelf proximity. As you eat, your mind wanders. Not far, your legs can't take much more, but just enough. You think about all the other wanderers like you, drifters, traders, fugitives, dreamers, people who came west with a plan and now just tried to survive long enough to form a new one. You wonder how many made it, how many didn't. You scratch behind your ear. Dust falls like confetti. You sigh again. That bench could use a cushion, or a back, or a completely different material. Still, you're here. Clean-ish, alive, watching a dog try to chase its tail and fail with heroic commitment. Maybe this isn't winning, but it's not losing either. Just another day in the Wild West. You don't mean to stay long in this little town, but the West has its own ideas. By the time the bath warmth has fully left your skin, you've somehow volunteered, or more accurately, been volunteered for fence-mending duty on the outskirts. You don't remember agreeing to it, but when a wiry old man hands you a hammer and says, "You look like you've got useful thumbs," it's hard to say no. The fence in question is meant to keep cattle in, coyotes out, and people like you busy. It's a patchwork of splintered planks, rusted nails, and wishful thinking. The sun glares down as if personally offended by your presence, and the hammer's handle has a mysterious sticky patch you try not to think about. Fence work is surprisingly loud. Boards creak and snap. Nails shriek into the wood like they're auditioning for a horror opera. Every now and then, something rustles in the brush beyond the field. Maybe a rabbit, maybe something with more teeth. Historians still argue whether frontier labor was communal out of necessity, or just a sneaky way to get free help. What's clear is that no one really rests unless everyone does. Even the kids are gathering firewood, or running errands. One boy is tasked with chasing away crows from the corn patch, his weapon of choice, a long stick, and the world's shrillest voice. The woman who handed you your bath time earlier, her name's Marta. You've learned it brings you a tin cup of sour milk. Helps the digestion, she says. It tastes like someone dared a goat to become yogurt and then lost interest halfway through. You drink it anyway, because Marta has a look that suggests she's hit someone with a shovel before. Eventually, the fence is upright. Barely, it leans a little, like it's considering a nap, but it stands. That counts. You return the hammer. The wiry old man nods once and tosses you something wrapped in cloth. Inside, jerky, possibly beef, possibly shoe leather. Still, it's food, and you're not asking questions today. You wander back toward the center of town where the saloon is finally open. Let's talk about the saloon. It's not like the movies. No swinging doors or piano player with a handlebar mustache pounding out ragtime tunes. No brawls breaking out every 6 minutes. Instead, it's a long, low building with shutters that only close if you believe hard enough. Inside, it's dim, dusty, and smells like whiskey and furniture polish made of regret. A few men sit at scattered tables, playing a slow card game with more sighing than strategy. A barkeep stands behind the counter, polishing a glass with a rag that looks like it's been through several wars. You order a drink. He doesn't ask what kind, he just pours. It could be whiskey, it could be varnish. You sip cautiously, your eyebrows lift involuntarily. It's both. Nearby, a woman leans against a support beam, watching the room with the alert boredom of someone who's seen everything twice. Her dress is faded indigo, her boots scuffed but proud. You nod. She doesn't nod back. You respect that the piano in the corner is silent, but someone's carved a crude message into its side. Benny owes me to chickens. You wonder if Benny paid up. You hope he did. You sit with your back to the wall, not because you expect trouble, but because that's what everyone else is doing. The West is full of silent agreements like that. Sit where you can see the door. Don't ask questions you don't want answered. Always check your boots before putting them on. A man walks in wearing a hat so wide it nearly counts as real estate. He orders something dark and thick, then sits in the corner, watching, just watching. You sip slower. Outside, the sky has started, turning that soft orange that suggests dinner might be a good idea. You step out and smell beans. Glorious, boiling beans. Dinner's being cooked behind the general store, in a large Castilian pot slung over a low fire. A woman with braided grey hair stirs it with a wooden spoon taller than most children. You offer to help, and she hands you a second popcorn mash this time. It smells like hope with a side of smoke. This is where you get your real education. As people gather around the fire with tin bowls, the stories start again. Not the big booming tales of gunfights or gold mines. These are quieter stories. The kind about weather, about lost tools, about the time someone accidentally buttered a rock and didn't notice for a full minute. You learn about storms that roll in so fast they steal your words mid-sentence, about wells that go dry without warning, about a man who once claimed he could smell gold, only to walk straight into a cactus and retire from prospecting forever. You laugh, not just politely, jestingly, because in the Wild West, laughter is a survival skill. As night creeps back in, someone passes around a shared pipe. The smoke smells faintly of sage and something mysterious that might be optimism. You take a puff, it burns, then mellows. Your lungs protest, then shrugged. The stars emerge like they've been waiting for their cue. So many of them, more than you ever see back home, wherever home is now. The Milky Way stretches across the sky like spilled sugar on dark velvet. Someone starts humming. It's not a song, you know, but it's familiar anyway, like the sound of boots on dry dirt, like the creak of a saddle or the soft hush of a breeze through scrub brush. You lean back on your elbows and look up. For a moment, you're not tired, not sore, not trying to survive anything. You just are. And out here, sometimes that's enough. Morning arrives in the Wild West, not with a gentle sunrise, but with a sudden, brash shout of roosters, wood clanging, and someone loudly asking where the heck their other boot went. It's less of a dawn and more of a boot to the ribs. Figuratively, sometimes literally, you wake on a straw-stuffed cot in the back room of the general store. Muscles sore in places you forgot had muscles. Your blanket smells faintly of mothballs and whatever pine-scented dream the last person who used it had. Still, it's better than sleeping outside, where the coyotes sing lullabies and mosquitoes perform midnight air raids. Outside, the day begins with people already in motion. Wagons rumble over hard-packed earth. A boy is failing to convince a stubborn mule to move. A woman is boiling water in a dented kettle, smoke curling from the fire like a lazy ghost. You stretch, yawn, and immediately regret both. Your back audibly pops, startling a nearby chicken. You figure it's time to try breakfast. You wander toward the cook fire and are greeted with a bowl of you're not entirely sure. It's beige, lumpy, and steams like it's got secrets. The woman who hands it to you calls it slap, which may or may not be a joke. You eat it anyway, because out here, calories count more than taste. The conversation over breakfast is light, practical, and just a little bit grim. Rains might come soon. Crops look like they're plotting something. Saw a rattler by the well again. It's all delivered in the same flat tone, like reporting on the weather or announcing someone's lost their second toe too. Frostbite. One man mentions a traveling preacher expected to pass through. He's got a cart, a Bible, and allegedly some kind of tonic that cures snakebite, heartbreak, and baldness. Mostly alcohol. Someone mutters, but smooth token alcohol. You finish your slap and help wash the bowls in a tin basin, filled with frigid water and a handful of stubborn soap flakes. The wind picks up, tugging at your collar and reminding you that, while it's technically spring, the West doesn't follow calendars, it follows mood swings. Mid-morning, a stranger rides into town. You hear the horse first sharp hooves on dry dirt, then the quiet. People pause. Conversations trail off. A few hands drift toward belts, just in case. The rider is tall, cloaked in dust and silence, with a rifle slung across his back, and a hat that throws serious shade. Literally and figuratively, no. One draws, no one shouts. But the tension thickens like gravy left too long on the stove. Historians still argue whether this kind of silent standoff was common, or just Hollywood drama retrofitted onto a quiet, survival-focused culture. But right now, no one's blinking. Then the stranger nods once, tips his hat, and moves on past the general store. Just a traveler, maybe, maybe not. Still, everyone breathes again. You wander after him, curious, not following, shadowing a few steps behind, like a polite ghost. You watch him tie up his horse at the watering trough, lean down, and speak softly into its ear. The horse flicks its tail but doesn't bolt. Whatever he said must have been convincing. The stranger disappears into the saloon, and you lose interest. You've got enough of your own survival problems without borrowing someone else's mysterious subplot. Instead, you help unload a supply wagon that's finally rolled into town. The driver is a squat man named Josiah, who speaks exclusively in grunts and biblical metaphors. He thanks you with a lopsided grin and a sack of dried apples that taste like sweet leather. Honestly, best thing you've eaten in days. In the afternoon, you join a group heading to check the river. It's a half-hour walk over uneven ground, past scrub-brush anthills, and the occasional suspiciously round pile of definitely not chocolate. The river, when you find it, is more of a trickle, but it's clear, cold, and apparently not cursed. A definite win. You fill a few water skins and dip your hands in. The cold bites instantly, wakes you up faster than gossip. One woman chuckles. She's got a face like sun-dried honesty and a laugh that bounces off the rocks. You ask her about rattlesnakes. They're here, she says, but they're polite, usually warn you first. You nod, filing that under not entirely comforting. On the way back, someone spots smoke on the horizon. Just a thin line, distant, curling up like a question mark. No one panics, but no one jokes either. Fires out here aren't just danger, they're disruption. Livestock scatter, homes go up like tinder. The land doesn't forgive accidents, and it definitely doesn't send warnings. Back in town, people are already talking. The smoke's direction puts it near the edge of the settlement, close enough to be a concern, not close enough to be chaos. A small group saddles up to investigate. You stay behind, partly out of caution, mostly because your only mode of transport is your blistered feet. You spend the evening helping patch the roof of the blacksmith's shed. He's a man of few words, but his eyebrows do most of the talking. You learn the rhythm of nailing shingles without hammering your thumb. Well, mostly. As the sun dips low again, coloring the dust in soft gold, someone calls out from the edge of town. The riders are back. No fire, just smoke from a campsite. Travelers, traders maybe, or a lost family making slow progress. Relief ripples through the town like wind through dry grass. That night, there's music, not the kind with fiddles or fancy steps. Just a woman with a voice like worn velvet, humming an old tune by the fire. A few others join in, quietly. You hum too, even though you don't know the words. The melody is enough. Someone hands you a cup of warm broth, spiced with something earthy. You drink, you breathe, you listen, and for the first time in what feels like a long while, you feel okay, that the West is still wild, still unforgiving. But you've made it another day, blistered, sunburned, mildly paranoid but whole, which, around here, is as good as it gets. Night settles in without asking. One moment, you're watching the last sliver of orange peel away from the horizon. Next thing you know, it's black as ink and just as thick. The stars begin to freckle the sky, crisp and cold, each one a pinhole. In the fabric of the heavens, somewhere out there is the moon, but tonight it's playing coy behind clouds. You're back near the fire again, sitting cross-legged on a worn blanket that someone swears used to be part of a wagon tarp. It smells faintly of bacon grease and pine resin. Around you, the town is a slow churn of flickering lanterns and murmured voices. Folks speak softer at night out here, not from fear, necessarily, but from habit, like the darkness might lean in if you're too loud. A man's playing harmonica near the saloon. The tune is low, wandering, not quite happy, not quite sad, just ... Western. It sounds like wind over canyon walls, like old regrets and dust in your teeth. You close your eyes for a moment and feel the heat of the fire against your face. It's one of the few luxuries you get out here, this small, flickering promise of not freezing to death. The wind nudges your back like a rude ghost, and you tug your coat tighter. The subject of conversation tonight, wolves. A rancher named Ilna, whose laugh could scare barn doors shut, tells a story about the time her dog faced down a whole pack. He stood his ground, she says proudly. Got bit, but he stood. I respect that in a man or a mutt. The others nod. Wolves are respected here, not just feared, but admired. Smart, organized, unapologetically wild, kinda like some people you've met. Someone else brings up the local legend, the ghost wolf. Big as a horse, pure white eyes like coals, shows up before major blizzards. Some say it's a spirit guide, others say it's death in a fur coat. Either way, a grizzled trader mutters. You see it, you head the other way. Historians still argue whether these tales were actual frontier sightings or just metaphorical coping mechanisms. But after a few weeks in the Wild West, you realize metaphor and survival often share a bedroll. You step away from the fire to get some air, or at least something less soup-like than the smoke-choked circle. The stars are brighter out here, away from the flames. You can see the Milky Way stretching across the sky like someone spilled sugar on black velvet. You think about how the people who came before you used those stars to travel, to navigate deserts, rivers, treacherous terrain without Google Maps or gas stations selling authentic jerky. Just constellations, luck, and a gut feeling that maybe east was the way home. You tilt your head, tracing imaginary lines between stars. One of them might be Mars, or maybe it's just a persistent bit of ash in your eye. Either way, it's a nice distraction from the ache in your feet. Not far from town, a coyote yips another answers, then a third. The chorus builds, rises, peaks, then stops, all at once. The sudden silence is louder than the howl. You stand very still. In the distance, you hear a faint rustling. Maybe it's just a tumbleweed, maybe not. Out here, the line between harmless and deadly is drawn with a broken pencil. You return to the fire, pretending you weren't momentarily weighing the odds of surviving a sprint in cowboy boots. You settle back down, and someone hands you a hunk of cornbread. It's dry enough to qualify as insulation, but still warm. You eat it gratefully, an older woman gravel voice, fingers stained with berry juice from some earlier batch of jam starts, telling a story years ago. There was a preacher came through, she says. Had a mule smarter than any man I've met. Mule could fetch, roll barrels, even nod yes or no. One day, the preacher disappeared. Mule stayed. Wouldn't leave the spot they last camped, not even for food. What happened? Someone asks. No one knows. She shrugs. But now, they say if you're out near that bend by Widow's Rock, and you're real quiet, you'll hear hooves in the dirt. Slow and steady, just one set. You wrap your arms around your knees, not sure if the chill crawling up your spine is from the story or the temperature. Storytelling is a ritual here, a necessary one. It knits people together when there's not much else to hold on to, and just like a good patchwork quilt, everyone adds their own squares frayed, mismatched, sometimes absurd, but warm all the same. The harmonica player shifts into a waltz. Two teenagers awkwardly begin to dance clumsy footwork, unsure hands. Someone chuckles, someone else claps in rhythm, and for a brief moment the town feels ... normal ... But nothing lasts long out here. A dog barks, loud, urgent. A man near the fire stiffens, hand drifting to the rifle by his boot. Everyone else quiets instantly. Even the wind seems to pause. There's movement near the far edge of town. Just shadows at first, then a silhouette steps into view. A woman, coat trailing, hat low. She walks with purpose, like someone looking for something or someone. You don't recognize her. Neither does anyone else. No one says a word. The saloon doors creak. The harmonica stops mid-note. She walks through town without looking sideways, heading toward the stables. After a long pause, life resumes. The harmonica starts again, though shakier now. Someone mutters, "Trail rider, maybe." Someone else mutters, or maybe not. You stare into the fire, trying to forget the way her boots didn't make any sound. Eventually, you unroll your bedroll on the ground behind the general store. It's slightly less lumpy than last night. You lie down and pull your coat over your shoulders. You think about ghost, wolves, haunted mules, and the soundless woman. And then you remember the cornbread. You smile, just a little, because even in a place where everything's trying to kill you, someone still thought to bake. You wake before dawn, though dawn is a generous word. Out here, the sky just fades from black to slightly less black, like someone whispering light into the world, one cautious syllable at a time. Your back aches. Your legs are stiff. There's frost on your blanket and something crunchy beneath your hip, possibly a pinnacone, possibly a scorpion. You don't check. Best not to know. You sit up slowly, exhaling a visible puff of breath. The campfire from last night has dwindled into a pile of lazy embers, still warm but fading. Someone stirs nearby, swaddled in every piece of fabric they own. Another mutters something about beans in their sleep. The town is quiet, barely breathing. But not for long. You hear the metallic clatter of harnesses and the low, rhythmic creak of wagon wheels. A team of mules trudges by, followed by a tall, square-jawed man with boots caked in prairie dust. He tips his hat to no one in particular. It's mail day. The West doesn't care how tired you are. Mail day is sacred. That canvas sack slung over the wagon's side might hold news from 2 months ago. A letter from someone you thought was dead, or an overdue tax bill that ruins your week. All possibilities are equally thrilling. You stretch, roll up your bed, and join the slow trickle of folks heading toward the general store. It's not exactly a post office, but it's got a nailed-up board with names scribbled in charcoal and a desk where the mail gets dumped. Unceremoniously, someone's already flipping through the pile. "Anybody know a Miss Lillian B. Harrow?" he asks, holding up a sealed envelope like a lost treasure. No one answers. He shrugs and tucks it into a basket labeled unknown, probably dead. You spot your name or at least something close to it scrawled across an envelope made from paper that's half grease stain, half hope. You tear it open gently. It's from your cousin in St. Louis. She's doing well. She's married now, has a garden. You read the words 3 times, just to let them sink in. A garden. You try to remember what a fresh tomato even smells like. Something soft and green and impossibly delicate. Here, plants grow mostly out of spite, and even then, they're usually prickly. You tuck the letter into your coat like it's made of gold. Across the room, a boy receives a bundle tied in twine. Inside are 3 pieces of hard candy and a knitted scarf. He nearly cries. The scarf is orange and itchy. It's perfect. Meanwhile, the mail wagon is already moving again, heading toward the next dusty hamlet. The man driving it doesn't wave goodbyes, just nods once, and disappears over the hill like a mirage in reverse. You linger near the store, watching a group of folks crowd around a tattered newspaper. The date at the top says it's from August. It's November now. Close enough. There's a headline about a bank robbery in Kansas and a grain shortage somewhere up north. There's also a sketch of a mustachioed man wanted for crimes against proper hat etiquette, which earns a few chuckles. Frontier humor has low standards and a high tolerance for exaggeration. Historians still argue whether frontier mail routes truly connected distant communities or just offered the illusion of connection. But when you're holding a slip of paper, that proves someone, somewhere, remembered your name. The illusion feels plenty real. You step outside again, blinking at the pale morning light. The town is beginning to stir. You see someone hammering a shoe onto a horse that's clearly not impressed with the arrangement. Another person sweeps the saloon's porch with a broom that's more twigged than handle. Near the edge of town, there's a man painting a sign. The letters are crooked, the paint uneven, but the message is clear. Doctor sometimes. You wander toward the well in the center of town. It's the gathering place for gossip, hydration, and passive-aggressive eye contact. A girl is hauling up a wooden bucket with surprising strength, her sleeves rolled to the elbow and her eyes sharp. She offers you a nod, then a ladle. The water tastes like minerals and history. You sip slowly, grateful. Cold be damned. Not far from the well, you spot something new, a wagon with brightly painted sides, bearing the words, "Traveling Curiosities and Rare Admittance." It wasn't here yesterday. A tall man in a velvet vest stands beside it, waving a feathered hat and announcing, "Behold, the bottled brain of a 2-headed calf." A small crowd gathers. Some are amused, some are skeptical. One is clearly just hoping for an excuse to throw a tomato. Peer into the cart and see shelves lined with dusty jars, strange bones, and things floating in murky liquid. It smells like pickles and bad decisions. You make a mental note to return later. You wander past the blacksmith, who's already hard at work. Sparks fly as he strikes metal, each clang echoing like punctuation marks across the town. He's shirtless, despite the chill, because apparently masculinity runs on its own weather system. Next door, a woman is stitching up a boot, humming to herself. She doesn't look up as you pass, but she offers a quiet morning. It's the kind of greeting that means we're alive, and that's enough. You feel a breeze tug at your coat, carrying the smell of hay, manure, and distant pine. You close your eyes and let it pass over you like a memory. There's a rhythm, a cadence of survival. You wake, you eat, you work, you mail. You find joy where you can, in letters from home, in pickled oddities, in the shape of smoke rising from a chimney like a lazy dancer. You return to the fire circle from last night. A few coals still glow. You poke one with a stick, just to see. If it stirs, it does. Someone walks by and says, "Mail, come." You nod. "Anything good?" "Yeah." You say, "A garden." And for a moment, that one word holds more warmth than any fire. You stay near the fire a while longer, listening to the town stretch its limbs and shake off the night. The warmth doesn't last. Both the coals and the mood cool quickly as the sky turns grey again. The kind of flat, endless grey that feels like it's been painted across the world with a broom. Your stomach growls loudly. Everyone hears it. A man walking past raises an eyebrow and mutters, "You and me both." Breakfast in the West is ... negotiable. If you're lucky, there's hot tack. If you're really lucky, there's bacon grease to scrape onto it. Most mornings it's dried beans or leftover stew from the night before, now congealed into something that resembles food only if you squint. Today, you have a strip of jerky and a single biscuit that's more fossil than flour. You chew carefully, very carefully. One cracked molar and your dental options are a pair of pliers, 2 shots of whiskey, and screaming into a log cabin wall. As you gnaw, you hear the piano in the saloon start up. Someone's playing a simple tune, plinky and slow, like a lullaby. Dragged through molasses, the player's probably just passing through, maybe working for tips or whiskey or a place to sleep. Or maybe they just found it unlocked. You walk that way and peek inside. It's early yet, so the place is quiet. No card games, No shouting, just one man, hunched over the keys, his coat patched with mismatched wool. He doesn't notice you. His fingers moved slowly, like he's remembering the tune more than reading it. On one of the tables, a tall glass holds something amber. Could be whiskey, could be horse medicine. In the West, that distinction is often blurry. You leave him to his peace and wander on. Outside, the wind kicks up a cloud of dust that gets in your eyes, nose, and possibly soul. You blink hard and wrap your scarf a little tighter. The town is shifting into work mode. A woman leads a mule down the street, its saddle packed with bundles of herbs and fabric. Children scamper behind her, giggling and arguing about whether ghosts can ride horses. Spoiler, in Western folklore, yes, and they usually want revenge. Historians still argue whether these ghost stories were meant to scare children into good behavior or to explain the unexplainable missing people. Strange weather, that one horse that always spooked at shadows. Either way, tales like the bleeding saddle and the lantern lady are told and retold every night around every campfire. You stop by the blacksmith's again, this time just to watch. That's mesmerizing. The glow of the forge, the hiss of water on hot metal, the thunderclap sound of hammer on steel. The blacksmith doesn't speak much. He doesn't have to. His work does the talking, shaping horseshoes, sharpening plow blades, maybe even making the occasional iron poker both for hearths and for settling barbets. You lean against the doorway, inhaling the scent of soot and sweat and iron. It smells like permanence. Someone walks up beside you and squints inside. You think he could make a pair of ice skates. They ask, you blink. What for? They shrugged. Saw it in a book once. Looked fun. You both laugh, the kind of low chuckle that says we'll never actually do that, but thanks for the idea. You stroll on, past the edge of town, where the buildings give way to dry fields and rocks, and more sky than should be legal. There's a narrow path leading to the creek, more mud than water right now, but it still trickles faintly, whispering to itself. You crouch by the edge, splash some water on your face, and immediately regret it. Cold enough to punch your skull from the inside out. Still, refreshing, sort of. Beside the creek is a pile of smooth stones arranged in a circle. Someone's been skipping them, or maybe practicing. You find a flat one and give it a go. It bounces. Once, twice, then sinks with a soft plop. Success, by frontier standards. A few feet away, someone's washing clothes, smacking fabric against a rock, like it owes them money. The water turns cloudy. Soap root floats on the surface. The woman scrubbing hums under her breath a tune you half recognize but can't name. She pauses and says, "You ever think about leaving?" You glance up. All the time. She nods. But then who'd do the laundry? Fair point. You walk. Back slowly, each step kicking up puffs of dirt. Near the stables, a boy is brushing a horse with what looks like a handful of twigs. The horse endures this with long-suffering dignity. You nod to both of them. The boy grins. The horse sneezes. Lunch is technically not a meal so much as an arrangement. Today, it's cold beans and whatever you can convince someone to trade for. You manage a heel of bread from a woman who claims it's only a little burned. You thank her and chew around the edges. In the shade near the edge of town, a man is carving something into a length of wood. It's a flutor trying to be. He blows into it experimentally. The sound is not musical. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Practice. You find a seat on a split log and settle in for a bit, watching the sky again. Clouds hang heavy, threatening snow, or rain, or something in between. You tug your coat tighter. Your fingers trace the edge of your tin cup, now filled with weak coffee made from beans that gave up trying. It tastes like regret and ash. You sip it anyway. It's warm. That's enough. A dog trots by, one ear chewed, tail wagging like it's got a secret. Behind it, two men argue over whether the moon really controls cattle births. One swears by it. The other just wants to get on with fixing the fence. You stand and stretch, joints creaking like old barn doors. The West ages you fast sawn wind, bad coffee, and all, but it also carves you into something solid, or at least stubborn. You walk past the well again. Someone's tied a ribbon to the crank handle blue, sun-bleached, probably a reminder of someone or something long gone. Give it a tug. It flutters. You smile. Because here, sometimes, small things are the whole point. By afternoon, the air has shifted. A storm's coming. You can feel it in your molars, in the way the dust no longer floats but clumps and falls. The sky's gone sourer, yellow-grey bruise stretching from horizon to horizon. You tug your hat. Lower. It's going to be one of those afternoons. The street clears out fast. People know better than to get caught in western weather. It's not dramatic like hurricanes or elegant like snow. It's mean, unapologetic, a blend of wind, grit, and whatever else the heavens can cough up. You duck into the mercantile. It smells of flour, sacks, and cracked leather, and the wood floor creaks with every step. Inside, a woman is counting beans while a man haggles over whether the sugar is too damp to weigh. You step aside as a small child barrels past you, clutching a cloth doll missing one arm and a face. Her mother doesn't chase her, she just sighs. You hear it in your bones. You browse, not really shopping, just hiding from the wind. There's a bin of nails, some boots that were new during the last war, a shelf of soap that looks more like chalk, a single dusty jar of pickles sits like a relic on the back wall, label faded to ghost letters. The shopkeeper raises an eyebrow at you, looking for anything, or just pretending. He asks, just pretending? You reply. He nods, like that's the most honest answer he's heard all week. A gust of wind rattles the windows, and a sign outside thumps against its frame. Someone swears in the distance. The door tries to open itself, but the shopkeeper wedges a barrel against it. Business hours, when nature allows. You sit on an upturned crate and watch as the wind turns the street into a moving wall of dirt. Somewhere out there, a wagon wheel is creaking like a ghost's rocking chair. A dog howls once, long and low. Then, silence. The silence of a dust storm isn't peaceful. It's loaded. It presses on your ears like altitude, like you're underwater in a bucket full of sand. Historians still argue whether these storms were more psychological than physical in impact. Sure, they tore down fences and collapsed sheds, but the real damage was what it did to your nerves, the way it ground into your sleep and stained your dreams ochre. Eventually, the wind slows. You step back outside into a street blanketed in grit. Everything is softer now, blurred. People start emerging, brushing themselves off, coughing into sleeves, blinking like moles dragged into daylight. Someone mutters, "Guess that's lunch," and a bath in one. You walk back toward the boarding house, kicking a clump of mud that squelches unnervingly. A man nearby is digging out his doorstep with a soup spoon. It's the only tool he could grab in time. At the corner, a notice board flaps with layers of half-drawn posters: missing mule, Bible study at sundown, reward, lost harmonica, and one that simply says, "Beware the goat." You pause at that one, just long enough to wonder. Inside the boarding house, you peel off your outer layers, now dust-drenched and stiff. The woman who runs the place tosses you a rag. Your face looks like someone painted it with gravy, she says. Beef or chicken? She snorts rattlesnake. You laugh, wiping yourself off with something that used to be a curtain. Dinners, cooking something with beans, naturally, and a faint trace of salt pork. The smell is less offensive than usual, which you count as a win. You help set the table, avoiding the broken fork and the bowl with the chip that cuts mouths. The meal is quiet, filled with the clink of tin and the occasional slurp. Someone tries to tell a joke about a preacher, a gambler, and a goat walking into a saloon, but forgets the punchline halfway through. No one minds. The goat is the funny part anyway. Afterward, you wander toward the edge of town. The storm's aftermath has left everything muted and oddly peaceful. The sky has returned to its regular flatness. You find a rock and sit on it, watching the wind tease the tumbleweeds back into motion. The prairie stretches out before you, vast and uncaring. It doesn't hate you, it just doesn't notice. And that's almost worse. You pull your coat tighter and glance behind you. A few kids are trying to build a kite from scrap paper and string. One of them insists it will summon the lightning. Another says lightning is God's whip. Either way, you step back a few paces. Nearby, a man is whittling a small wooden figure. He says it's a dog, but it looks like a melting badger. Still, he's proud. He tells you it's for his daughter, who lives 2 towns over. He hasn't seen her in 3 years. Stagecoach doesn't come that way anymore. He shrugs, but it's the kind that tugs at your chest. Back in town, the saloon is lively again. Cards slap tables, dice clatter like bones in a cup, and the piano is attempting something upbeat, but keeps losing the rhythm. Doesn't matter. No one's keeping time here anyway. You decline a drink this time. Not because you don't need it, because you do, but because your stomach's still recovering from yesterday's mead. Instead, you lean against the wall, eyes half closed, and just let the noise settle over you. A woman passes by, trailing a scent of pine tar and rosewater. She nods at you. You nod back. Frontier flirting. 101. Later, you return to your corner of the boarding house. The wind rattles the shutters again. Somewhere in the walls, mice are debating territory. You stretch out on your cot, bones crackling like a dying campfire. Sleep won't come easy. It rarely does. But your body is sore in that honest, been-through-it kind of way. The way only dust, wind, and too much sun can deliver. You sigh, pull the blanket over your eyes, and think just for a moment about home. Whatever home means anymore. You smile, because you made it through another western day. You're woken before dawn by something cold, wet, and vaguely insulting nudging your hand. A dog, the boarding house's unofficial mascot, part mutt, part vacuum cleaner, all attitude. He stares at you like you're late for something, even though you haven't committed to being on time for anything since you got here. You sit up slowly, joints cracking like a saddle in winter. The room is chilly, but not brutal. There's a whisper of dew on the window, just enough to remind you that morning in the Wild West doesn't offer mercy. It offers tasks. First on the list, water, always water. You grab the bucket from the corner, fingers curling around the wooden handle worn smooth by dozens of equally reluctant hands. Outside, the sky is soft and colorless, tinged with a pink. That'll soon be replaced by sunburn and squinting. The pump is halfway across town. Of course it is. You pass the butcher already open. Of course. His apron is cleaner than usual, which is slightly concerning. He waves with a hand that may or may not have just handled a lung. You wave back. Frontier etiquette. You nod at the blacksmith, who was arguing with a man about whether a wagon wheel can be fixed with glue and prayer. Probably not, but everyone's a little superstitious before breakfast. You reach the pump and heave. It's stiff, groaning like it's remembering every winter it's ever endured. After several creaky pulls, water gushes out muddy at first, then clearer. You fill the bucket and try not to think about what's floating in it. Whatever it is, it's protein. Historians still argue whether communal pumps were revolutionary or a disease vector with ambition. You don't care. You're just glad you don't have to dig a well yourself. Bucket in hand, you make your way back, trying not to spill too much. The dog follows you again, hopeful. You let him lick a drop from your boot, and he looks at you like you're a saint. Back at the boarding house, breakfast is already cooking. Smells like old eggs and older beans. You dump the bucket on the wash basin and splash your face with something that might legally qualify as water. The boarding house crew is in varying states of consciousness. One man is wearing only long johns and one sock, explaining loudly why snakes are misunderstood. No one asked, but it's early, and arguing takes energy. You eat quickly, one eye on the beans, the other on your spoon. There's something about the way it jiggles that doesn't inspire trust. But food is food. The dog gets your crust. After breakfast, it's time to do something. That's the trick with the Wild West. Tasks aren't scheduled, they happen. You might fix a fence, mend a boot, help dig a hole for reasons you're too polite to ask. Today, it's the latter. You and 3 others are out near the cemetery, shoveling dry, stubborn earth. No one's saying who the grave is for. That's not weird, it's just West. You take turns, wiping sweat with sleeves, shifting dirt like you're mad at it. The shovel is splintery, the sun relentless. Eventually someone mutters, "This would be easier with dynamite." Everyone laughs a little too long. One man tells a story about a guy who faked his death to avoid taxes, came back a week later, pretending to be his own twin, made it 3 months before someone noticed he still limped the same way. Now he's buried properly under 2 names. After the digging, you stretch your back until it sounds like a rifle misfire. Then it's time for the post office. The postmaster is a small man with a mustache that twitches when he's lying. He hands you a letter that smells like tobacco and loneliness. No return address, just a scrawl. You slip it in your coat, unopened. Mail days are rare. So are letters that don't deliver bad news or cryptic instructions. You're not ready to be either curious or devastated yet. You spend the rest of the afternoon in the saloon, not drinking, just sitting, watching, listening. There's a card game going. One man has a twitch, another has too many teeth. Both are losing. You sip something that's either tea or floor cleaner and think about the letter again. Eventually, a girl with a fiddle starts playing. Not a song you know, just notes, stitched together like patchwork. It's imperfect and perfect all at once. You lean back. Outside, a dust devil dances down the main road, stirring leaves and hats, and at least one confused chicken. Inside, it's warm, almost cozy. A man nearby coughs and mutters something about the rail coming through town. Someone else scoffs. Rails, been coming for 10 years. No tracks though, the first man says. Just hope it doesn't bring bankers, says another. And the room collectively shudders. Historians still argue whether the arrival of railroads truly democratized frontier. Accessor just commercialized it. In either case, it changed everything. But for now, this town remains a speck on the map, stubborn and unpaved. You finally open the letter. It's not from anyone you recognize. Just a single sentence written in pencil. Spring's coming. Don't let it surprise you. Cryptic. Maybe comforting. Weirdly, yes. You tuck the letter away and step outside. The light has changed again. Evening is creeping in, curling over rooftops like a cat settling down. You make your way back to your cat, boots off, hat hung. You lie back and listen. Crickets, the distant creak of a sign, laughter from the saloon, now dim and fuzzy through the walls. You think about spring, about soft grass and warm rain, and maybe planting something useless like wildflowers. You smile again, because the West isn't just dust and danger. Sometimes it's fiddle notes and mysterious mail, and the knowledge that you've made it one more day. One more dust-covered, sun-blasted, oddly poetic day. The night settles over the town like a heavy wool blanket, scratchy, warm in patches, and a little hard to breathe through. The moon hangs above like a pale coin, tossed onto the black felt of the sky. You lie there, stretched out on your thin mattress, listening to the last murmurs of the saloon fade into the wind. Even the dog has stopped scuffling around underfoot. It's quiet now, too quiet. You shift under your blanket. It smells faintly of hay and pipe smoke, like everything else around here. You've finally managed to find a position that doesn't jab your hip bone against the floorboards when something creaks from the hallway. Just once, short, but enough to make your eyes snap open. You hold still. Listen, creak. There it is again. Definitely footsteps. You hear the doorknob twitch. Not turn, just that faint, metallic tap, like someone testing it with a gloved hand. You don't move. This isn't your first suspicious nighttime noise. Out here, doors are more suggestion than barrier. The steps retreat, and you let out a breath you hadn't realized you were holding. Could have been someone lost on their way to the privy, or someone looking for an unlocked room. Either way, you stay absolutely still for another minute, just in case. Eventually, sleep starts to take hold again. It always does. Eventually, you dream, of course, not of home, not anymore. Now it's all horses and creaking wagons, dusty crossroads, and empty canteens. Sometimes you dream of the stagecoach coming in, wheels cutting clean through the dust, like lines drawn in a story you've already forgotten. Tonight, you dream of a river, wide, still. You're not sure where it is, but the water is cold, and there's a bridge made of rope and planks barely thicker than your palm. You don't know whether to cross or stay. The dream doesn't say. It just hums. Back in the real world, the town breathes in slow rhythm. The boarding house groans once, like an old man adjusting in his chair. The fire in the hearth has gone down to its bones. Only a soft red glow remains, like the last heartbeat of something ancient and stubborn. You rise before the others. Habit. Now outside, the sky is more fog than light, but birds are chirping in that half-hearted, maybe spring's coming kind of way. The ground is hard under your boots. Frost glints on the well's rim like sugar dusted over something much less sweet. You fetch water again. You always do that today. There's talk about trouble up north. A rancher's fence cut clean through. Cattle scattered. Maybe just rustlers. Maybe more. You nod like you understand, because that's what you do. The sheriff's not in yet, still nursing a cracked rib from a bar stool incident. So you and 2 others mount up and ride out. Not quickly. There's no galloping in real life unless something's on fire. You ride like people who know just how far their backs can bend before they stop bending. The prairie opens before you, endless, lit with that hazy golden wash that makes you believe the land is smiling at you. But it isn't. It's just playing nice today. You pass a lone tree, bent sideways from years of wind, gnarled like a forgotten finger pointing nowhere. In particular, someone once nailed a horseshoe to its trunk. It's rusted now, but still there like a wish someone forgot to collect. You ride in silence for a while. Words feel heavier out here. They have to cross miles of silence to land. Eventually, you find the cattle. Some are meandering, some are napping like oversized sacks of meat, and one is attempting to climb a hill that is, in all honesty, beyond its pay grade. The fence was cut clean. All right, wire snipped, posts kicked over. Could have been animals, could have been angry neighbors. Historians still argue whether territorial disputes were more about survival or just human pettiness with extra horses. Either way, someone's fixing this fence. You mark it, turn the cattle back toward the ranch. You'll report it, and someone with stronger hands and fewer opinions will handle it. Back in town, things are quieter than they should be. Today, no letters, no fights in the saloon yet. It feels like the world is holding its breath, waiting for the wind to change. You eat lunch with your back to the wall, boots crossed at the ankle, plate balanced on your knee. It's stew again. It always is. Possibly rabbit, possibly shoe. Later, someone drags out a fiddle again. You lean against the porch post and listen, eyes half closed, breath slow. The music isn't good, exactly, but it's honest. A child runs past, shrieking something about gold nuggets in the creek. His mother yells after him, "Those are just shiny rocks." He doesn't care. The sky is darkening again. That in-between time, day pulling its coat on, night still fumbling with its boots. You watch the stars prick through, one by one, like old friends showing up to tell you they made it. And then you know, you've survived another day. You didn't freeze, you didn't starve, you didn't shoot anyone, or get shot. You remembered to thank the fire. You even smiled once or twice. Sure, you're exhausted, sore in places you didn't know could be sore. Your mead leaked, your socks have betrayed you, and you're fairly certain the dog is judging your life choices. But you made it. You crawl into your cot, muscles humming, head heavy. The fire flickers against the wall, casting long, strange shadows. One of them almost looks like a figure, bent and horned. But you blink, and it's gone. Just the post, just the light. You close your eyes, you breathe, you listen to the silence, and finally you sleep. Hey guys, tonight we're time traveling back to a place where the wind whistles through cracks in the walls. Your only pillow is a burlap sack filled with chaff, and your breath fogs the air inside your bedroom. That's right, we're bundling up in the long dark chill of a medieval winter night. Don't imagine this. The sun's vanished by late afternoon. The fire's down to sullen coals, and you're lying on a lumpy straw mattress that smells faintly of old onions and sheep. Your hands are raw from hauling icy water from the well, and the damp of the stone floor is rising up through your wooden clogs. If you're lucky, your cloak's not infested with fleas. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where and when you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey. Together, you shut the rickety door behind you, trying to wedge it tighter with a stone, though the wind still whistles through the thatch. Your fingers are red and stiff, and your nose has stopped registering cold because it's given up entirely. You move toward the hearth. Few pale embers blink lazily under the ash. You blow on them, gently, carefully, the way you've learned over countless evenings like this. A flicker, a spark. You prod a bit of dry dung into the ashes and whisper encouragements like a medieval fire whisperer. Eventually, flames cough to life. The room, if you can call it that, is maybe 15 feet across. Packed earth floor, no ceiling, just beams, and thatch above. You hunch low, because there's a draft that zips across the higher air. If you stand up too fast, you'll be reminded that you shouldn't have stood up too fast. You rub your hands over the fire and look around. There's no glass in the window, just oiled parchment stretched over a wooden frame. It lets in a milky half-light during the day, and now it lets in the creak of winter branches and distant barking. The walls are made of wattle and daub, basically a medieval sandwich of sticks and mud. They aren't insulated, but they do look sort of solid if you squint. You glance at your bed, a wooden frame with ropes stretched across it, covered in a straw-stuffed mattress. You flipped it last week, which helped distribute the lumps evenly across your spine. A single wool blanket lies folded on top. It's not very thick, but it smells faintly of lanolin, and you've convinced yourself it's warm through sheer stubbornness. And yes, you're sleeping fully clothed tonight. Like always, boots on, hat on, cloak pulled tight. You curl up like a salted anchovy, trying to make the smallest version of yourself that still counts as alive. Outside, the wind moans like a vengeful goose. You close your eyes and imagine spring. Just for a moment, buds on trees, the smell of tilled earth, bees. Then something creaks in the roof and dumps a clod of cold thatch onto your face. Right, it's not spring. It's barely December. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants experienced anything close to our concept of comfort. Some say they were so used to cold, they barely noticed. Others argue that winter was a slow agony of numb fingers, chilblains, and counting days until lambing season brought new warmth. What we do know is that people were remarkably adaptable. You adjust, you develop a sixth sense for when the fire is about to die. You can light a tallow candle blindfolded. You can sleep through the sound of rats chewing on last summer's grain. You learn not to stretch your feet too far out of the blanket or they'll wake up looking like turnips. There's no clock, but you estimate it's just past midnight when you finally find a warm enough position. Your knees are touching your chest, your hat's slipped down over one eye, and a goat lets out a snort from the corner. Yes, there's a goat. Of course there is. We'll get to that soon. Outside, frost is forming on the edges of the world. Inside, you curl tighter, breathe in the smoky air, and prepare to outlast another frozen night. Your breath rises in little clouds. The fire hums softly. Somewhere in the darkness, a mouse sneezes. You're still curled up like a medieval cinnamon roll when you start to notice just how alive your walls are. Not with mice, well, yes, also with mice, but with air. Cold, nosy air that pokes in between the reeds and mud as if it's curious about your dinner plans. This is your Waterlandob home, and while it technically qualifies as a structure, you suspect a strong sneeze could collapse at least a corner. The walls are made by weaving sticks. Together Waterland, then that with a glorious combination of mud, straw, hair, and manure. Daub, like a peasant lasagna. It's organic, it's sustainable, and it occasionally falls off in clumps during heavy rain. But hey, if it dries out, you can just smear it back on. Think of it as patchwork insulation with a personal touch. You shift under your blanket and feel the breeze nudge at your toes again. The only thing between you and the outside world is about 2 inches of medieval ingenuity and prayer. Some parts of the wall feel weirdly soft. That's probably where someone leaned their back too often. Or maybe it's where a chicken decided to warm herself earlier and added a little something to the daub mix. It's all very collaborative. The roof is no better. Thatch made from dried reeds or straw, layered thickly to repel rain, but not necessarily mice or birds. Pigeons love to live up there. So do spiders. You hear them sometimes, scritch, scritch, building tiny penthouses above your head. Occasionally, when you're lucky, an owl lands up there and scares them off for a bit, or eats them. You try not to picture the leftovers tumbling into your stew pot below. But this is home, your cozy little biodegradable, partially composting nest. You glance at the beams overhead and think, at least they're solid. Oak, probably. Harvested from the Lord's land, of course, and not exactly with permission, but no one counts individual trees, right? The chimney, if you have one, isn't a grand stone flue, it's more of a hole near the peak of the roof. A hopeful escape route for smoke. Often it fails, so the air inside your cottage carries a permanent haze. Your clothes absorb it, your hair smells of it. When you burp, it tastes faintly of smoked peas. Historians still argue whether smoke buildup was intentional as a sort of primitive insulation or simply tolerated. Some suggest peasants allowed the soot to accumulate in the rafters as an extra layer of draft blocking. Others point out that being perpetually semi-smoked probably kept insects and mold away. So, win-win. You sit up for a moment and your breath fogs in the air. The breeze pokes again at your cheek. You realize you're not sure where the wind is getting in. It might be that missing corner tile from the roof, or that crack near the door frame. That looks wider than it did yesterday. You reach over to the wall and press your palm against it. It's clammy, cold, slightly crumbly. You resist the urge to knock, because last time a piece flaked off and hit the goat, and she held a grudge for days. To distract yourself, you think about what might be on the other side of the wall. Snow, probably. Maybe frozen mud. Definitely. Silence, or, well, the kind of silence that includes the occasional owl scream and distant church bells. You imagine your neighbors huddled in their equally breezy homes, tucked under thin blankets, dreaming of hearths that don't require daily negotiations with damp dung. You lie back down and pull your blanket tight. You can hear the wind now pushing at the door, and for a moment it sounds like a sigh. Not your sigh, the house's sigh, as if even the building is tired of holding itself up. Still, there's something kind of comforting about it all. The soft give of the walls, the familiar creak of the timber, the way the whole house feels like it's breathing, wheezing a bit, maybe, but alive, in its own way. A handmade cave of mud and memory. You pull your cloak tighter and let yourself sink back into that smoky, flickering half-sleep. Outside, the frost deepens. Inside, your walls lean in a little closer, like old friends trying to keep the warmth in. You wake with a snort and a cold nose. Not because anything dramatic happened, but because something warm just nudged your leg. You blink in the smoky darkness. There it is again. A little hoofed shuffle, a soft bleat, and then the unmistakable smell of hay-scented breath. Ah, yes, Bessie, your goat. She's not here for fun. She's here for heat. And so is the chicken under your bed. And the family's one-eyed cat curled up like a cranky muffin on top of the hearth bricks. You're all in this together, one big, barely functional heating system with hooves, feathers, and attitudes. It wasn't unusual at all for medieval peasants to share their living quarters with animals. In fact, it was strategic. Livestock provided body heat, delightfully moist and musky body heat, yes, but heat nonetheless. A few sheep in the corner could raise the indoor temperature by a few degrees, which, when your walls are leaking air, like a colander leaks soup, can mean the difference between frostbite and mild shivering. You shift your leg, trying to make peace with the fact that a goat is now pressed against your shin like a furry space heater. There's hay in your blanket, again, but it's not a bad trade-off. At least she's not snoring. The pig used to snore. You remember that pig? He lived with you 2 winters ago, until he got too fat to fit through the doorway. You'd have to grease the frame and coax him out with cabbage. He was very warm though, like cuddling a half-barrel of porridge. His departure to the festive stew last year left a noticeable dip in the nightly temperature. Historians still argue whether animal sharing was a universally accepted practice or more common in certain regions. Some records suggest wealthier peasants kept animals in adjacent sheds, while others in harsher climates embraced the shared bed philosophy. What's certain is that warmth was scarce and ingenuity abundant. Your goat, for instance, has made herself a nest out of your spare tunic. You don't argue. She earned it by surviving 3 snowstorms and chasing off that fox last spring. You just wish she'd stop staring at you while chewing. It's unsettling. The hen under the bed makes a soft cluck, rustles, and then lays an egg. Right there, no ceremony. You make a mental note. Breakfast, possibly with frostbite seasoning. Your family, if you're not living alone, sleeps in one large room. Maybe a curtain separates your parents, or maybe it doesn't. Privacy isn't a high priority when survival's on the line. Everyone bundles close. Children, cousins, that one neighbor who showed up during the blizzard and never quite left. You've developed a tolerance for snoring, scratching, muttering, and the occasional animal outburst. Like last week, when the cow mistook the firewood for a snack, or when the cat dramatically knocked over the candle, causing 15 seconds of chaos and 1 singed eyebrow. Still, despite the occasional hoof to the ribs or chicken perched on your stomach, you sleep better knowing they're here. Their warmth fills the gaps your blanket cannot. Their soft breathing becomes a lullaby. Even their barnyard smells start to feel oddly reassuring. Okay, maybe not that reassuring. You roll over and come face to face with the goat's rear end. You roll back. There's something primal about all this. You, your kin, your creatures all, packed into a shared, snorting pile of life. No separate rooms, no thermostats, just biology and proximity. Like a very itchy, slightly damp hug that lasts until March. You wonder briefly if nobles ever had to do this. Probably not. They had stone hearths, feather beds, maybe even separate animal quarters. But you also hear their castles were drafty, and some of them didn't have goats who loved them unconditionally. So who's really winning? Another gust rattles the shutter. The hen snores. Yes, hens can snore. At least this one does. And the goat, sweet Bessie, gently farts in her sleep. You smile, because you are, despite everything, warm. Your stomach growls, not the dainty little suggestion it usually makes around midday. This is a full-bodied gurgling protest, the kind that echoes off your ribs and reminds you that you had turnip soup for dinner. Again, still, you're grateful. Food means fuel, and fuel means warmth. In winter, every bite counts more. Not just to keep you moving, but to help you stay warm through the long, dark nights that feel more like trials than evenings. Dinner came earlier, right after sunset, when the sky turned the color of old iron and the fields vanished into frost. You huddled around the hearth with your family and ate slowly, because slow eating makes the food last longer. Tonight's menu was classic peasant fare: pottage, a bubbling mixture of barley, beans, herbs, maybe a shred of salted pork if it was a lucky day. You dropped in whatever was left from the larder: dried mushrooms, a suspicious carrot, half an onion you'd been saving since Tuesday. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hot. And in a house where your breath lingers in the air like a ghost, hot food is more than nutrition, it's comfort. It's a warm stone in the belly. You savor it, even when it tastes like boiled hay. After the meal, you drank a small cup of ale, strong, just enough to dull the cold in your bones. Water isn't safe anyway, and the ale goes down smoother than snowmelt from the roof, which tends to carry a surprising amount of pigeon. You fed the animals a bit too leftover crumbs, wilted cabbage leaves, a few parsnip tops. They appreciated it. The chicken even looked mildly affectionate, which is saying something. Then came the evening routine. You banked the fire, nestling the glowing embers beneath a mound of ash to keep them alive until morning. The heat would fade, but slowly. It's a trick passed down through generations, how to stretch fire as if it were a loaf of bread. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants fully understood the science of heat retention or simply relied on trial and error. Some methods were surprisingly effective, using hot stones in beds, for example, or placing bread ovens in walls to warm adjacent rooms. Others, like stuffing hay in your shoes and calling it slippers, were less precise. After dinner, there's nothing else to do. No books, no lamps, just the creaking of the timbers, the settling of animals, and the rhythm of digestion. You scratch your leg absent-mindedly and pretend it's not fleas. It probably is, but they're just trying to stay warm. Sleep comes in stages. You lie back with the residual warmth of your meal still glowing faintly in your stomach. You curl tighter, cloak wrapped like a burrito of poverty. You feel the fire's last breath, a faint warmth on your toes. It'll be gone soon. A few feet away, someone is snoring in a pattern that sounds like they're trying to play a drum with their nose. The goat shifts again. The chicken rustles. Your stomach gives one final sigh, now half full and somewhat appeased. You start to drift, and just as you do, you remember the cheese you hid in the rafters. You were going to save it for tomorrow, but now it feels like it might freeze solid overnight. Should you retrieve it, risk waking the cat, who's perched in just the wrong place? No, you let it go. Tomorrow's cheese can be tomorrow's miracle. Instead, you sink into that odd twilight between wake and sleep, your body warmed by scraps and soup, your head filled with slow thoughts of better meals: a roast, a pie, a big fat egg, gently steaming in your palm. One day, you think, one day. Tonight, you sleep on soup, and it's just warm enough. You're not sure what wakes you this time. Maybe the cold tip of your nose, maybe a sudden shift in the air. You blink blearily into the dark. The fire's long gone to sleep, a sullen pile of grey ash. You can barely see the outline of the hearth. The goat is snoring now, deep, rhythmic, almost philosophical. You reach for warmth, but all that's left is the humid breath of animals and the memory of dinner. Your blanket has slipped, and the night air takes the opportunity to jab at your spine like a petty ghost. You grope around, pull the blanket back, and curl tighter only to realize you're half off the mattress. The straw pokes through your tunic like vengeful needles. Still, you don't get up, because moving would mean stepping onto the stone floor, which feels like the kiss of death this time of night. Instead, you huddle closer to the hearth, or what's left of it. This is the warmest spot in the room, right by where the fire used to live, where the bricks still retain the memory of heat. If you could wedge yourself into the hearth, you would, but the cat has beaten you to it. She stirs, stretches, and looks annoyed that you're trying to poach her precious warm square. The room smells of smoke and something faintly animal. Not bad, exactly, just very present. You've grown used to it. Your nose barely registers it anymore, except on rare days when a guest arrives and flinches slightly upon entry. Your breath fogs the air. You try to breathe slowly, evenly, so you don't lose too much warmth. You know the routine: conserve heat, minimize movement, and avoid the temptation of that nice big jug of water by the door, because it's probably frozen solid anyway. Some nights, you stay up watching the shadows flicker across the beams. You know them all by heart. That one near the corner looks like a hound. The one above the door is a bit like a crooked hat. You once thought it was the Virgin Mary, but it turned out to be soot from a particularly smoky batch of peat. Historians still debate whether peasants truly used the hearth as a focal point for domestic life, or whether it simply became that by necessity. In homes like yours, with one room and one heat source, the hearth is everything: kitchen, heater, nightlight, and sometimes even therapist. You've had deep thoughts staring into those coals. Some of your best internal monologues have happened with a spoonful of pottage and a glowing ember for company. During the day, the hearth works double time. It boils your soup, dries your socks, warms your fingers after you've been breaking ice from the trough. Sometimes you even toss in pine needles for the faint whiff of a Christmas you've only ever heard about. But at night, it becomes a test of planning. Did you bank the coals just right? Is there enough dry fuel nearby to restart it without going outside? Will you have to burn a stool leg again, like that one time last year when the snow buried the woodpile? You scoot a little closer to the hearth and feel the last flickers of warmth leaching from the bricks. You want to reach in and stoke something, but there's nothing left to stoke. Just ash, faintly warm, like the dregs of a memory. So you do what every sensible peasant does. You wrap your cloak tighter. You press your knees to your chest. You think warm thoughts of midsummer meadows, hot bread, the feel of sun on your arms. You remember last July, when you were sweating through your linen tunic and wishing for cool air. Past you was a fool. Present you is considering wearing the stew pot as a hat. Eventually, your eyes begin to close again. Not from comfort, but from fatigue. The kind of tiredness that seeps in when every hour is a calculation of heat, and every movement is a small risk. You breathe out one last plume into the dark. The hearth is cold, but you've learned how to sleep near ghosts. Your eyes crack open again. Morning still hasn't come. Your limbs are stiff, your toes feel like pickled turnips, and you're covered in approximately 3 layers of wool, 2 of them questionable. You consider removing your boots, just for a moment, to wiggle your toes, but that would require untying them, and you haven't felt your fingers since the fire died. Instead, you pull your cloak tighter and sigh. You're already wearing every piece of clothing you own, including the hood that's half buttoned under your chin and tied up like a baby bonnet. You'd laugh at yourself, but your face might crack if you try. This, you tell yourself, is medieval fashion at its finest. Not the gowns and hose from the tapestries, but the honest peasant's winter uniform, layered, lumpy, and vaguely damp. Under everything, there's a tunic, scratchy wool, never washed enough, smelling of smoke and onion. Over that, another tunic, or maybe it was once a dress, borrowed from someone's great-aunt and hastily reshaped. Then there's your overdress or doublet, or whatever you're calling this patched-together garment today. On top of that, your cloak, thick, heavy, fringed with hay, and beneath it all, for added insulation, you've stuffed moss into your sleeves. Yes, moss. It's warm. Don't question it. You haven't bathed in weeks. No one has. It's winter. Water is cold. Bathing is dangerous. And warmth is a limited time offer. You're not trading for the luxury of rinsing your armpits. If you're feeling fancy, you'll wipe your face with a cloth dipped in warmed wine. You did that once. It was glorious. You smelled like spoiled grapes for 2 days. You reach up to scratch your head and discover your hair has formed an alliance with your hat. They are now one. You leave them be. Historians still argue whether peasants really slept in full dress each night or simply layered up as needed. Some records suggest they undressed only minimal, perhaps removing outer tunics, but kept on base layers to avoid freezing. Others believe the never undressing idea is a bit of a myth. Either way, you know you're not taking anything off unless someone invents indoor heating. There's also the matter of laces. Every layer seems to be tied with a piece of leather or string that you swore you could undo yesterday. Now they've shrunk with the damp, frozen into little angry knots. You poke at one experimentally, then give up. Your breath still fogs in the air, even under all this fabric. You look like a disgruntled bundle of laundry that someone forgot near the fire. A very quiet bundle, trying to sleep. You shift on the mattress, which rustles like a sack of crisps. The straw inside is trying its best. You fluffed it last week, which bought you 2 nights of relative luxury. But now it's flattened again, and a suspiciously sharp lump has made its way directly under your hip. You suspect a rock, or perhaps a message from the gods. Still, compared to sleeping outside, this is paradise. You think of the beggar who passed through town 2 days ago. He was wrapped in a horse blanket and had shoes made of bark. He'd tied string round his legs in a desperate attempt at leggings. He looked like a very sad Yule log. He shared some of your soup with him. He offered you a riddle in return, which made no sense, but the sentiment was warm. Now, curled in your layers, you feel a fleeting moment of smugness. You may smell like a smoked radish and have moss in your armpits, but you're not outside. You have a roof. You have animals. You have boots that are mostly still whole. The goat shifts beside you in size. Her warmth seeps into your side, and, for a moment, you feel nearly cozy. You think about all the people who share your winter ritual. The neighbor with 9 kids and a roof that leaks. The old woman who wraps her feet in cabbage leaves and claims it keeps her warm. The blacksmith who sleeps near his forge, surrounded by cats. Everyone has their system. Everyone survives the cold in their own eccentric way. You sigh again, shifting the cloak to cover your nose. Warmth isn't about comfort out here. It's about endurance, about cleverness, about which bits of string you tie together to create something vaguely blanket-shaped. You feel absurd. You feel half-frozen, but you are not cold enough to give up. And that, you think, is what counts. You are not going outside. You tell yourself this firmly as the icy draft creeps up your blanket like a passive-aggressive spirit. You can't even feel your toes, and now nature's calling rudely, insistently. You shift under your layers, weigh your options, and reach the same inevitable conclusion every medieval peasant reaches around this hour. You have to use the chamber pot. With the heavy sigh of someone preparing for battle. You sit up, slowly. Every joint cracks. The mattress wheezes beneath you. The goat grumbles. Somewhere beneath the bed, the chicken pecks once and mutters. Your breath fogs as you reach for the patter, ceramic bowl tucked under the bed, next to an old shoe and a long-forgotten turnip. You yank it out, wincing as your fingers graze its icy rim. Cold, so cold. This is the part no one romanticizes in tales of the olden days. The nighttime rituals, the deep discomforts, the knowledge that if you don't hold your cloak just right, there will be you whisper a quiet prayer to St. Cuthbert, patron of poor decisions and cold bottoms. You do what must be done, gingerly, resentfully, balancing with the skill of a circus acrobat. The chamber pot is your savior, and your curse, at least it means not trudging into the yard, where the outhouse stands like a sinister scarecrow, probably frozen shut and definitely haunted. Historians still debate how common indoor chamber pots were among peasants. Some argue they were a luxury item, more prevalent in urban households. Others suggest that even the poorest folk made do with some form of vessel, especially in colder climates, to avoid midnight trips through frost and manure. You finish, set the pot gently aside, and wrap yourself back into your cocoon. The floor has numbed your feet, and your left heel feels like it's made of wet stone. You wiggle it uselessly under the blanket. The fire is still dead. Your stomach growls again, as if it's trying to start a conversation with the pot. And then comes the second danger of the night. The draft. Your door doesn't shut tightly. It's just a wooden plank hung on leather hinges. You've stuffed rags in the cracks and leaned a sack of rocks against the base, but the wind is persistent. It finds new pathways. It slinks in low and cold, like a cat made of ice. And if that weren't enough, there are other things you fear in the night. Not wolves or bandits, those are rare. It's the quiet noises, the creaks, the distant bells, the howl of something not quite wolf, not quite wind. Your mind wanders, as it tends to in the dark. What if the fire reignites by itself? What if the goat gets up and opens the door, like she did that one time? What if someone is out there, someone not quite human? You've heard stories. Everyone has. Of spirits who pass by cold houses and enter through chimneys. Of old witches with frost in their veins, who pinch the toes of those who sleep too soundly. Of wandering monks who died without blankets and now seek to share yours. You curl up tighter and mutter a quick charm, just in case. That's when you hear it. A thump. Not loud, not close, but very much there. Outside, maybe on the roof, or in the shed, or just your imagination. Your imagination has been particularly active since the last time the cheese went moldy and gave you odd dreams. The goat hears it too. She lifts her head, snorts, and goes back to sleep. You wait. But there's nothing else, just your breath, the wind, the occasional shifting groan of wood and thatch. You're safe, probably. You're inside, and even though your feet are frozen and your nose feels like a piece of brittle, you've made it through another nightly ordeal. You close your eyes again, drifting into shallow sleep. Somewhere nearby, a rat investigates the remains of dinner. The chamber pot waits smugly under the bed. And you are surviving. One draft, one goat, one chill at a time. You're dreaming, or at least, you think you are. The room feels different, now quieter somehow, though you can still hear the soft breath of the goat beside you and the occasional rustle from the hen. But the dark has a different weight too. It's watching. Then a sound so soft, you might have imagined it. A whisper, a creak, or maybe just the house settling again, doing its old wood and mud impersonation of a living thing. But you're awake now, mostly. You lie still, breathing slow, listening. In this half-dreaming state, your thoughts wander. What time is it? The cock hasn't crowed yet. No bells in the distance. Just that deep, velvety dark of midnight, stretching endlessly on. And your mind, like every good medieval peasant's mind, starts to wander into stranger territory. They call it the first sleep. People in your time don't sleep in one neat 8-hour stretch. No, sleep comes in two parts: first sleep and second sleep, with a window of wakefulness in between. Sometimes it's used for quiet prayer, sometimes a mug of warm ale, sometimes something a bit friskier if the blankets aren't too cold and your spouse doesn't have chilblains. But often, this in-between time is where dreams blend with superstition. You feel it now. That eerie stillness, the way the world seems to hold its breath. You try not to think about the things people say can happen in this hour. Spirits, night hags, wandering souls looking for warmth. The old man in the next village swears he saw his dead wife during his second sleep standing over the hearth, feeding the fire. Historians still argue whether this segmented sleep was universal or mostly regional. Some point to letters and manuals that describe it as routine. Others think it depended on local customs, seasons, or even diet. But you know with bone-deep certainty that you wake every night around this time, and your thoughts always get peculiar. You remember what your grandmother used to say: never leave your shoes facing the door after sundown, or something might step into them. Don't sweep the hearth after dark, or you'll sweep out the house's luck. Don't whistle. Don't yawn too wide without covering your mouth. Something might mistake the opening. You pull the blanket a little higher. Your dreams lately have been strange, too vivid, shifting. Last night you were chasing a fox across the snow, barefoot, until it turned and spoke to you in Latin. You don't even speak Latin. You assume it was Latin because it sounded smug. The night before, you dreamed of warm bread. You cried in your sleep. You know others have these odd visitations. The midwife down the lane believes that dreams during the gap are the closest to true visions. Between sleeps, she says, the veil lifts a bit. She also puts leeches in her hair to improve circulation. So, mixed credibility a few times. You've tried to use this hour productively. Mending a tear, checking on the fire, whispering a prayer or two. But mostly, you lie here, eyes open, brain wandering. You start to hear noises again. Not alarming ones, just noises. The beam above you creaks. The chicken sighs in her sleep. The goats chews air thoughtfully. From somewhere outside, a dog barks. Once and then falls silent. You think of all the others lying awake at this hour. The whole village, scattered in their homes, half asleep under lumpy blankets. Some dreaming of saints, some dreaming of cheese, some lying quietly, just like you, wondering if that was the wind or something older. Eventually, the magic of the hour fades. You feel the shift slow, almost imperceptible, like the world taking its next breath. Your eyelids grow heavier. Your thoughts settle. No more foxes, no more whispers. Just the soft beat of the wind against your walls and the warmth of the goat pressed against your leg like a slightly hairy oven. You roll onto your side, tug the blanket up, and begin the long, quiet descent into second sleep. The sun hasn't risen, but you can tell something has changed. Not in the light, there isn't any, but in the feel of the dark. It's starting to fade at the edges. Just a touch, a softness replacing the chill, and something else. Two voices, not ghosts, thankfully, just people, real ones, faint murmurs, laughter, and the occasional creaking door. You groan quietly and pull the blanket tighter over your head. Your neighbors are awake. You can hear them through the thin walls. And the air, the thatcher 2 doors down, is already clumping around in his boots. Someone's child lets out a shriek, too much energy for this hour. Somewhere across the lane, a woman sings a snatch of a morning prayer, only slightly off-key. You yawn and try to burrow deeper into your straw, hoping that if you hold perfectly still, you'll become invisible. But then, predictably, comes your house's own form of alarm clock. The goat sneezes directly in your face. You sit up, bleary-eyed and betrayed. The chicken clucks approvingly. She's already moving around the room like she owns the place. The cat watches you from the windowsill with the expression of someone who has just judged your life choices and found them lacking. You stretch, bones crackling like dry twigs, and shuffle to the hearth. It's cold, still dead. You knew it would be, but it still stings. You kneel stiffly, uncover the coals, and try to coax something out of them with breath and broken twigs. Smoke sputters, then flame reluctant, as if it, too, isn't ready for today. Someone knocks on your door. Not a real knock, just the polite sort of rap people do when they're already halfway inside. A neighbor. She peeks in, wrapped in so many layers she looks like a walking hay bale. Her nose is red. Her smile's warmer than the fire. "Just came to see if your goat wandered off again," she says, peering past you. "She was in my kitchen last week." He shrugged. "She lives here now." The woman laughs. Then she sighs, pulls out a little cloth bundle, and sets it on your hearthstone. "Some porridge, still warm. Don't ask where the butter came from." You nod, heart full. In times like this, warmth is shared just as often through kindness as through fire. Peasants survive not just because they're tough, but because they're together. After she leaves, you unwrap the bundle and inhale deeply. It smells like oats, cinnamon, and actual butter. You don't cry, but your eyes do mist up, and you blame the smoke. You think about how the village pulls together in winter, how people trade warmth like currency, a spare cloak here, a log for a cup of broth there, how the midwife sleeps with the miller's family during the coldest weeks, just so no one's alone, how gossip is passed like hot bread, soft, warm, and a little bit dangerous. You remember last year, when old Tom fell through the ice trying to retrieve his shoe. Half the village showed up to fish him out and scold him lovingly, while wrapping him in goat blankets. He never lived it down, but he did live, and that's the point. Historians still debate how close-knit medieval villages really were. Some records suggest harmony and shared burdens. Others paint a picture of squabbles, feuds, and bitter rivalries over pigs and fence lines. The truth, as usual, lies somewhere in the smoke between. You slurp your porridge and feel it spread its warmth through your belly like a gentle candle. The goat eyes you, clearly expecting a spoonful. You sigh and share a bite. The cat glares. The chicken hops onto the table and starts pecking your sleeve. This is the morning ritual. Warm food, soft voices, shared space. You don't have much, none of you do, but you share what you've got. Heat, humor, the occasional egg. A cloak mended by someone who couldn't feel her fingers that day. You sit quietly by the growing fire and listen to the village wake. Up doors creak, snow crunches. Someone yells at a pig. It's chaos, but it's your chaos. And somehow, all of you will make it through another winter, together, with goats and porridge, and possibly a stolen spoonful of butter that no one will ever talk about. It's still cold, of course, but now it's a lively cold, the kind, filled with the smells of smoke and wet wool. The clatter of wooden pails, the sound of someone down the lane attempting to sing despite the chill tightening their throat. You shuffle out of bed like a reluctant tortoise, adding a third sock to your left foot, because it's the lucky one. Time to get ready for one of the few pleasures of winter, a festival. Well, sort of. See, when you're a medieval peasant and you've been freezing for 3 months straight, you need any reason to remember that life can be more than soup and sore joints. That's where the winter festivals come in. Little bursts of communal joy, smuggled into the bleakest weeks like candles in a cave. Today might be the feast of St. Bridget, or Candlemas, or some hyperlocal celebration where everyone pretends to enjoy radish-based pudding. You don't even care what the occasion is. The important thing is that someone is baking something that doesn't involve dried peas. You wrap yourself in all your layers, a gangoat hair cloak, questionable mittens, a scarf that smells like elderberry wine, and make your way out into the bright, brittle air. The frost crunches underfoot. The sun, when it bothers to show up, is low and cold, casting long shadows like spilled ink. But the air hums with excitement. At the village green, someone's setting up a crude maypole made from a suspiciously straight fence post. There are ribbons. One of them's probably a shoelace. Children run in circles, laughing clouds of breath into the air. The blacksmith's wife is already ladling out a thick stew that smells like it might contain actual meat. You feel faint. And then someone shouts, "They've got a fire pit." You rush over, heart pounding, and behold the miracle. A shallow pit lined with stones, filled with glowing embers and the blessed holy scent of roasting onions. You inch closer. You can feel the warmth before you even reach it. Someone offers you a skewer of something vaguely poetry-shaped. You don't ask, you bite. It's heaven. Winter festivals like this are patchworks of tradition, belief, and practical necessity. They're half church calendar, half excuse to burn something and dance around it. People gather not just for joy but for heat, for gossip, for reminders that spring might not be a myth after all. Historians still argue how widespread such gatherings were. Some suggest they were more common in market towns. Others claim even tiny hamlets found ways to mark time with celebration. What's clear is that humans, especially chilly ones, will always find an excuse to sing and make a little noise. Someone nearby strikes up a tune with a reed pipe, and a young boy starts rhythmically banging two wooden spoons together with alarming enthusiasm. The dance that follows isn't elegant, but it moves, and that's enough. You sway a little on your feet, not so much dancing as thawing in rhythm. A neighbor slips you a cup of something steaming. It smells like cider and bad decisions. You sip and feel it spread through you like fire in your ribs. You might not be able to feel your fingers again until April, but you can feel this. The joy, the silliness, the absurd determination to celebrate. Even when everything's cold and slightly moldy, the goat shows up. Of course she does. She's wearing a ribbon around her neck and eating someone's mitten. By the time the sun slips down again behind the hills, your cloak smells like smoke. Your cheeks ache from smiling, and you've learned 3 new verses to a song about St. Agnes and her hypothetical goose. You're also very full of questionable stew. The village begins to drift homeward in slow, warm clumps. People laugh, hum, link arms. Someone tries to take the maypole with them. Children fall asleep mid-sentence. You walk back to your cottage with a warmth you didn't have this morning, not just in your belly, but somewhere deeper, somewhere near your ribs. You push open your door, the familiar creak greeting you like an old friend. The goat trots in behind you and curls up near the hearth, which is somehow still glowing faintly. You stoke it gently, toss on a bit of kindling, and it flares up in welcome. Your hands thaw, your feet tingle. You sit, quiet, watching the flames dance. You survived another day of winter, and you celebrated like it was summer. Your legs still ache from yesterday's dancing. You didn't mean to get quite so carried away. But something about those reed pipe tunes turns even the most exhausted peasant into a temporarily nimble turnip. Still, fun's over. The morning bell hasn't rung yet, but your internal clock knows what time it is. The cold hour before sunrise. End today. Unlike festival days, there's work to do. You groan softly and ease yourself upright. No singing neighbors today. No stew. Just the promise of frostbitten fingers and another cracked bucket handle. But not everyone is tucked miserably in bed. Some people are already awake. Have to be. That's their job. You hear it, the low rumble of a cart rolling past on the frozen path. Wooden wheels, poorly greased. Probably Gertie the baker. She always starts early, even in the dead of winter. Her dough waits for no sun. You imagine her now, hunched over a soot-smudged oven, arms dusted in flour, sleeves rolled up past elbows. That haven't felt warmth in a week. But the heat of the bakehouse keeps her going. That, and the fact she gets first pick of the crusty ends. Early risers like her are essential. Even in cold months, the rhythm of village life ticks forward, thanks to these slightly sleep-deprived heroes. The baker, the night shepherd, the lamplighter in town if your village's main road is fancy enough to have oil lamps at all. And then there's the less honorable sort, the sneaks, the desperate, the mischief makers who use darkness as cover. Sheep thieves who skulk along fences with frozen boots and guilty hearts. Smugglers who shuffle grain under cloaks, knowing the reeve won't patrol before dawn. Even the priest's apprentice, who's known to borrow wine during morning prayers. You smile grimly. Not all jobs are noble, but they are consistent. Historians still puzzle over how much of medieval village labor truly happened before dawn. Some argue that darkness limited most tasks. Others point to records of bakers, brewers, and millers working, well into war, straight through the night, particularly in winter, when daylight was stingy and unreliable. Either way, your ears don't lie. The world is waking, one frozen chore at a time. You decide to rise. Kind of your legs dangle off the side of the bed, where they are promptly insulted by the floor. Cold, unyielding, and definitely not meant for bearskin. You hop awkwardly into your boots, muttering threats at your left toe, which has gone fully numb and might fall off just to spite you. You light a small tallow candle with yesterday's ember, shielding the flicker with your hand. The light is pitiful, yellow and reluctant, but it makes the walls look less like an ancient tomb. You open the door, a crack, just enough to see the street, dusted in white. No footsteps yet, no voices, just that cart in the distance, squeaking off toward the bakehouse. The morning belongs to those who dare face it first. Back inside, you throw on your cloak and decide to check the hens. The goat follows, clearly hoping you're going to do something thrilling, like drop food. The hen house is quiet, though one particularly ambitious bird gives you a cold stare, as if to say, "Where's my mash, peasant?" You toss them a handful of seed and trudge back indoors, hands already stinging. Your breath trails behind you like a misty ribbon dot. You wonder sometimes how people keep doing this cycle, this repetition, morning after frozen morning, pulling on the same socks, hauling the same water, starting fires with the same stubborn flint. And yet, they do. There's a rhythm to it, a quiet dignity. Even in the freezing dark, even with aching feet and no stew left, you light another candle, feed the hearth, sit on your stool, and listen to the world, slowly waking, to a dog barking, far off, to the creak of wheels, to a rooster crowing half-heartedly, as if unsure anyone deserves it. And then you smell it, faint, warm, utterly divine. Bread Gertie's done it again. You're back inside now, curled near the fire with a chunk of Gertie's bread, the good end, crusty and warm and blessedly real. It steams in your hands like a gift from the saints. You chew slowly, reverently, while the goat eyes you with her usual suspicion. She already stole the last bit of crust. She wants more. You offer her a small crumb, and she accepts it like royalty. The fire crackles low, and you find yourself staring into it, lulled by the dance of orange and gold. Then, inevitably, your thoughts wander somewhere strange. What does the church think about all this? About blankets, about warmth, about the pursuit of comfort during suffering? You've heard conflicting things. The old priest, Father Rolf, preaches that cold is a test of the soul. Endure the frost, and your reward in heaven shall be tenfold. He says this while wrapped in a velvet cloak with fur trim. You try not to be bitter about it. The nuns in the next town are rumored to sleep on stone floors year-round. For humility, for discipline, they wear their hair short, so lice have nowhere to hide, and bathe in cold water, even when it freezes on their skin. Some say they rub snow on their cheeks instead of using soap. Others say they enjoy it. That's how you know it's probably not true. Historians still debate how seriously these ascetic practices filtered down into peasant life. While the clergy embraced poverty and suffering in theory, the average villager had little interest in additional suffering, especially in January. Still, you remember your grandmother refusing extra blankets during Lent. "The Lord slept in a manger," she'd say. "I'll sleep with my elbows freezing." You're not so sure the Lord had frostbite. Still, religious belief hangs over everything. The rhythm of your year is dictated by feast days and fasts. You don't eat meat on Fridays. You attend Mass even when the snow is ankle-deep and you've just sneezed out something that looked like turnip soup. And you give thanks always, give thanks even when your toes go numb in your boots. There's a saint for nearly every winter problem. Saint Blaise for sore throats, Saint Lawrence for burns, Saint Bridget for dairy issues which, in your home, are frequent. And if all else fails, Saint Judah, patron of lost causes. You pray to him every time the fire goes out at 3 a.m. still. It's not all misery and martyrdom. You recall the church warming room, technically just a side nook with thicker walls, but during the coldest days, people gather there to share stories, to exchange firewood, to nap with one eye open while pretending to meditate. It's the closest thing to indoor heating most peasants ever see. You even remember one Lent, when the priest, perhaps out of guilt or boredom, allowed hot cider after evening service. People wept. A man proposed to the woman next to him on the spot. They'd been unhappily married ever since, but it was a beautiful moment. The Church's position on comfort is complicated. Monks write about spiritual discipline, but line their cloaks with rabbit fur. Some sermons warn against luxuria, the sin of indulgence. Even in warmth, blankets can be soft traps. Cushions can lead to sin. Warmth can invite laziness, but cold can invite death. So you walk the line, thankful for every ember, every hand-me-down cloak, every awkwardly mended sock, and still careful not to look too cozy in public, just in case someone starts quoting St. Jerome at you. Your bread is gone now. Your hands are warm. The fire hums, softly, filling the cottage with golden light. You curl your toes under the goat for good measure, and she doesn't object. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters. But in here, you're safe, and warm, and only slightly sinful, which is probably within the allowable limits. You cross yourself out of habit, mutter a prayer to St. Bridget for your goat's digestion, and lie back down beside the fire. Not every act of warmth is rebellion. Some are just survival, wrapped in wool. It's snowing again. You can hear it before you see it, the soft hiss of flakes brushing thatch, the muffled hush settling over the world like a blanket nobody asked for. You lift the edge of the shutter and peek out. The sky is iron grey, and snow tumbles down in lazy spirals, coating the ruts in the path and dusting the firewood pile you forgot to cover. Again, it's the third storm this month, or maybe the fifth. Hard to keep track when every day looks like the inside of a flower sack. You pull your cloak tighter and go to the hearth, where the goat is curled up like a smug potato. You envy her ability to sleep through weather, conversation, and minor household accidents. You nudge the fire. Still warm, thank the saints. The snow makes you think of darker stories, of harder winters, of the Little Ice Age. No one calls it that now. Of course, that term won't exist for centuries, but you know something's off. The seasons feel ... skewed. The spring floods are worse, the summers shorter, and the winters longer, meaner, more personal, like they're holding a grudge. You remember hearing your father talk about the year without a summer, though it's unclear if he meant the real one, or just another bad year. Crops failed, rain came sideways, and snow clung to the village well into what should have been planting season. There was talk that the sun had disappeared because of sin, or witches, or both. A monk blamed it on dancing. Too much dancing, he muttered, shaking his tonsured head, brings wrath. The local priest disagreed. He blamed the Flemish. Historians still argue whether peasants were aware of larger climate trends during the Little Ice Age. Some say people noticed the longer winters and reacted with increased piety or desperation. Others argue it was too subtle, unfolding over generations, just a cold decade here, a failed harvest there. But you notice the way roofs cave under snow more easily now, the way your boots stay damp from November through April, the way the river no longer fully thaws some springs. The ice lingers. It gets into your tools, your bones, your sleep. You think about your neighbors. Thomas the carter's son came down with frostbite last week, lost 2 fingers. The baker's hearth cracked from overuse. The elder who lives by the woods hasn't been seen in 2 days. And yet, here you are, still getting up, still stomping through drifts to feed the hens, still drying socks over the fire and pretending they don't smell like roasted swamp. There are strategies now, tricks. You line the walls with straw. You light 2 small fires instead of one big one, one for warmth, one for morale. You've learned to store firewood under the bed, tucked in with the straw. You even tried putting a hot turnip in your boots last week. It worked. Mostly people mutter about the changes. Quietly, no one wants to admit that the cold feels different now, more alive, as if the seasons are shifting, but no one's been invited to the meeting. And still, the village survives. Not because of warmth, but because of stubbornness. You refuse to let the cold win. You throw jokes at it like snowballs. You gather in clusters and laugh louder than the wind. You think back to Summerreal summer, with its bees and sunburns, and hot bread left to cool on the windowsill. You hold on to that memory like an ember, hoping it'll last until the thaw. Outside, the snow thickens. A crow caws once, then falls silent. Inside, the fire crackles, The goat snorts. The cat lifts her head, stares at the snow, and goes back to sleep. You huddle closer to the hearth and whisper to yourself, "This isn't the worst winter." Not yet. The wind's settled for now, giving your ears a break, and with the snow still falling in gentle, sideways flurries, you decide to stay indoors today. No point battling frozen mud when there are chores to do inside and ancient remedies too. Try. You're not the only one who's figured out the trick to staying warm isn't always fire or cloaks. Sometimes it's onions, or pig fat, or some truly questionable advice from old women with suspiciously bright eyes. You rummage through the kubada wooden box with more drafts than walls and pull out your small bundle of cures. A few sprigs of dried thyme, a chunk of beeswax, a jar of something that might have started life as honey and now looks like boiled tar. You give it a tentative sniff and immediately regret it. Still, it's time to face the truth. You're cold. Again, your toes have turned the color of old parchment. Your nose feels like a frozen plum. You need reinforcements. First, the classic onion potasses. You remember your grandmother swearing by them. Slice a raw onion, wrap it in a rag, and stuff it into your socks. Draws out the cold. She'd say it also draws out your dignity, but who's keeping track? You try it anyway. The sensation is immediate and unpleasant, but oddly warming. You now smell like dinner, but your feet feel vaguely tingly. Progress. Next, the legendary pig fat slippers. You don't have proper shoes for indoors, and your boots are still damp from yesterday's trudge, so you smear a bit of old lard on the inside of your foot traps and tie them back on. It's disgusting, it's slippery, and you feel like a poorly wrapped roast. But the warmth creeps in, slow but sure. The goat eyes you with admiration, or judgment. Hard to say. You move on to your hands. There's a trick for that too. Mustard seed paste. Though you only have one mustard seed left, and you're saving it for emergencies like impressing the Reeves' daughter. So instead, you rub your palms briskly with wool, and whisper the little rhyme you were taught as a child. Wool for fire, lard for heat, stomp the floor to warm your feet. You stump. The goat bleats, offended. Historians still debate whether these remedies were based in real medicinal theory or simply folk wisdom passed through centuries of trial, error, and sheer desperation. Some ingredients had mild warming properties, others were purely psychological. One 14th century medical text suggests wrapping live mice in cloth and tucking them under your armpits for warmth. You draw the line there. You move to your last resort, the heat stone, a flat rock you keep by the hearth during the day, heated gently, then wrapped in rags and placed in bed at night. Tonight, you'll try doubling it, one for your chest, one for your feet. It's crude, but better than cuddling the goat again. She kicks as you sit near the fire, reeking of onions and pig grease. You think about how ingenious people can be when survival is at stake. Every little trick, every odd invention, every whispered suggestion, passed down like a family treasure. You once heard a tale about a village woman who lined her bodice with goose down and claimed she never felt cold again. Another swore by stuffing dried nettles into her sleeves. Third insisted on drinking hot water with vinegar and honey every hour until she sweated out winter. She also smelled like salad dressing, but no one argued. You lean back in your chair, more of a stool with aspirations, and stretch out your legs. The heat from the hearth seeps into your bones. The cat finally deigns to curl in your lap, which is the highest medieval honor a person can receive. Her purring is like distant thunder, oddly reassuring. The snow continues its quiet descent. Outside, everything is soft and white and still. Inside, you're wrapped in a halo of weird smells and stranger techniques, but you're warm, and that's something. Not comfortable, not luxurious, but not freezing either. You smile to yourself. The old women knew what they were doing, probably, at the very least. They kept people busy and distracted, which is its own kind of medicine. You close your eyes, the fire pops once, the goat snores, and your onion-scented socks radiate faint, stubborn heat. You wake slowly, not because anything startled you. No draft, no goat foot in your ribs, no neighbor yelling about pigs in the root cellar. Just the natural, gentle pull of dawn creeping through your parchment-covered window like a sigh. The sky outside is still more ash than blue, but there's a softness to the light. It's no longer night, not quite day. That in-between hour where everything feels hushed. You lie still for a moment. letting your senses drift back into the world. The hearth is warm, just barely. Your heatstones still wrapped in cloth under your blanketar, now cool lumps, but they did their job. Your hands are stiff, your knees ache, and your breath still fogs the air, but your body made it through. You're alive. You survived another winter night. You sit up slowly, joint complaining in every possible dialect. The goat stretches beside you, yawns, and immediately begins chewing something that may have once been your mitten. You let her. It's not worth. The the chicken hops off her perch and clucks her way toward the door. She knows what time it is. Everyone does. The day waits, like a cranky landlord, ready to collect its rent in sweat and chores. You pull your cloak around your shoulders and pad over to the door. The latch is frozen, of course. It is, so you kick it lightly, then harder. Then with an unkind word under your breath, it budges. The door swings open. Outside, the snow glows with that fresh morning shimmer, unspoiled except for a few chicken tracks and one deeply confused dog trotting past. You step out, boots crunching softly, and breathe deep. The air is cold, but it's not as sharp. There's a slight wetness to it, a hint of thaw hiding in the breeze. Somewhere in the distance, water drips from a roof. Just once, just enough. You think of all the mornings like this, the rhythm of waking slowly, stretching beside a dying fire, nudging animals back to life with half-frozen hands, the quiet ritual of checking the sky, the stove, the socks. It's not glamorous, it's not even particularly pleasant, but yours. Historians often marvel at how peasants endured centuries of hardship, of brutal weather, poor housing, relentless labor. But maybe they forget the softer moments, the ones like this, a quiet fire, a breath of not quite winter, the sound of a cat purring and a goat farting gently into a hay pile. You walk to the well. The rope creaks as you lower the bucket. You half expect the water to be frozen solid again, but no, there's a splash, a real splash. Hope. You haul it up, arms aching. Your breath clouds the air, but the bucket steams faintly in the light. You smile. The first small victory of the day. Back inside, the animals are waking fully. The chickens pecking at the floor, hoping for yesterday's crumbs. The goats knocking over a pot. The cat, in a rare burst of helpfulness, chases a mouse out the door and then immediately regrets the cold. You sit by the hearth and sip from a cup of warm, watered-down ale, just enough to trick your body into movement. You think of the work ahead, mending tools, checking traps, maybe trudging to town if the paths aren't too treacherous, but not yet. For now, you're warm and upright and breathing, and you made it. Another night conquered by wool, wit, and just enough stubbornness to smother the cold. You rise slowly, you crack your neck, you whisper to the goat, "Same again tonight." She blinks and headbutts the door. You take that as a yes. And now, the fire's burned low. The air inside your little home is warm, but soft, thinned out, like the last breath of a candle. The goat is asleep again, curled into her corner of hay. The chickens tucked her head under one wing. Even the cat, once fiercely awake and judgmental, is stretched long and loose beside the hearth, paws twitching in a dream. Outside, the snow continues to fall, but gently now. It piles on rooftops, fills in footprints, smooths over fences. The world is wrapped in quiet, in softness, in something that feels almost like peace. You draw your blanket around your shoulders, heavier now than it seemed at nightfall. Not just with wool, but with memory, the warm bread, the steaming stew, the music in the square, the scrape of frost on the shutter, the little comforts that knit together a life. You breathe slowly, and the fire responds with a final crackle. Not urgent, not demanding, just a sound to remind you, you're home. Your body is tired now, the good kind, heavy-limbed, the kind of tired that only comes from surviving, again and again, through nights that were never promised to be easy. And so, you let yourself drift. Let your thoughts quiet. Let the cold stay outside your door for just a little while longer. Sleep. Now. The kind of sleep earned over firewood and frost, and the long, steady march of winter's heart. You are safe. You are warm, and morning is far, far away.